1,500,000 excuse me, social workers today and nearly 800,000 professionals expected to be employed as social workers by 2030. And whereas social workers undergo an extensive licensing process and must earn a master's degree before serving clients. Yet the median pay for social workers in 2022 was only $55,350. And whereas social workers have helped this nation live up to its values by advocating for equal rights for all, including Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, those who are LGBTQIA+, religious groups, and others, and whereas social workers possess the necessary expertise to assist our nation in some of its most demanding concerns, including their health and well-being, not only during the pandemic and aftermath, but at all times.
Now, therefore, I, Letty Hardy, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim March 2024 as Social Worker Month in the City of Falls Church and call upon all members of the community to join in the celebration of the social work profession and to advocate for appropriate regulations and legislation to better support social workers. Do we have anyone from the public to accept the proclamation, or staff? I know we've got excellent social workers in our schools and our general government.
I would be delighted to accept this on behalf of city staff, and any other members of staff would like to come forward.
Thank you. Already up next is a proclamation declaring March 12th, 2024 as Equal Pay Day. And Vice Mayor Sean Siska will do the honors.
Yes. Whereas more than 50 years after the passage of the Equal Pay Act and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, women and people of color continue to suffer the consequences of inequitable pay differentials. And whereas for over 25 years, Equal Pay Day has helped draw attention to gender-based pay disparities by highlighting how far into a new year a woman must work, on average, to earn what a man did in the previous year. And whereas the progress made toward achieving pay fairness should be celebrated, we should not be satisfied until Equal Pay Day is no longer necessary. And whereas, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 2020, the average woman working full-time, year-round, earned 83 cents for every dollar paid to their average male counterpart. And the disparities are even greater for Black, Native American, Latina, and certain subpopulations of Asian women when compared to white men. And whereas the pay gap reflects discrimination as well as barriers that women face in accessing good-paying jobs and meeting caregiving responsibilities, including a lack of affordable childcare and paid family and medical leave, which often prevent women from joining and staying in the workforce. And whereas over a working lifetime, this wage disparity costs the average American woman and her family $700,000 to $2 million in lost wages, impacting Social Security benefits and pensions. And whereas addressing the barriers that have long held women back from full participation and fair treatment in the workforce strengthens the security of families today and eases future retirement costs while enhancing the overall economy. And whereas Tuesday, March 12th, 2024, symbolizes the time this year in which the wages paid to American women catch up to the wages paid to men from the previous year.
Now, therefore, I, Letty Hardy, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim March 12th, 2024 as Equal Pay Day in the City of Falls Church and urge the community to recognize the full value of women's skills and significant contributions to the labor force and further encourage businesses to conduct an internal pay evaluation to ensure women are being paid fairly. Thank you all. How about we get a picture with all the women?
Should we do the next
Or we can do the next one and then do that. That's a good idea. Thank you. So to round it out, we have a proclamation declaring March 2024 as Women's History Month, and we're all going to join in. Who's going to start off? Miss Lynn's going to start us off.
Whereas women have made lasting contributions to the growth and strength of the United States, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and the City of Falls Church in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. And whereas women led the way in securing suffrage and equal opportunity for all, and in creating a more fair and just society.
Whereas Whereas women play prominent roles in the local history of Falls Church, which has been home to noted abolitionists, educators, business owners, volunteers, and visionary leaders. And whereas there are many opportunities to learn about women's history in Falls Church, and Women's History Month is an important opportunity to recommit to learning about the strong women who built our community. And
Whereas the Falls Church Women's History Walk, in its 7th year, is continually expanding, featuring the stories of more than 65 local women, including many that are permanently imprinted in city sidewalks on South Maple Avenue and Tinner Hill Road.
And whereas the 2024 Women's History Walk, presented by the Women's History Group in partnership with like-minded Falls Church civic organizations, will take place on Saturday, May 11, 2024, and
whereas Betty Allen, Maureen Budetti, Cynthia Garner, Mary Gavin, and Marion Costner-Selby will be recognized as Grand Marshals, and Marilyn Kay and Nancy Stock as honorees for notable and remarkable contributions to the Falls Church community, and Young Women of Action from Mary Ellen Henderson Middle School and Meridian High School will also be honored.
Whereas the community is encouraged to learn about the women who led Falls Church in the past and those who lead Falls Church into the future, as these women have, will, and do shape the character of our city, and the community is urged to emulate their example to make a positive difference in the lives around us here now and wherever they may go.
Now therefore, I, Letty Hardy, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim March 2024 as Women's History Month in the City of Falls Church and call on all residents to observe this month with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities, including participating in the Falls Church Women's History Walk. Thank you. I wanted to recognize Ms. Connolly and the Women's History Group for all the work they've done in making this a thing now in Falls Church and something that we can be proud of and participate in every year.
Thanks, Mayor Hardy. Can I say one thing?
Absolutely.
I think there's a few people that want to receive the proclamation. You notice that we're all wearing white and purple today, and we're taking a cue from Congress at the State of the Union address last week, and wearing white for women's rights. And I also would like to note that we had two really great panels last week, women's history panels at the middle school and high school. Mayor Hardy participated along with Marty Meserve, Nikki Graves Henderson, and 2 young restaurateurs, Carrie Tang from Ellie Bird and Twitney Lee from Chase and Tails and New and Role Play. And we had a full audience of middle schoolers who were thrilled and really learned a lot, and we had a smaller audience of high school students, but it was a really wonderful way to share all this information with the next generation.
Great. Would you all like to come up to speak or just receive the proclamation? Absolutely.
Here.
Yep.
Good evening. My name is Julie Krachman, and this evening I am representing the Falls Church Women's History Group. Thank you, City Council, for the proclamation and for recognizing Women's History Month. Thank you also for recognizing our special Grand Marshals and honorees. The walk this year, as is in the proclamation, is going to be on May 11th. We are very excited that we will be located in Cherry Hill Park on a Saturday for the very first time in the midst of all of our fun Falls Church activities. And the Cherry Hill Farmhouse will also be open for visitors. We extend a special invitation to our elected leaders to attend at any time during the day, but especially at 12 noon on the porch at Cherry Hill Farmhouse, where we recognize our honorees in a special ceremony. The walk began in 2017 and was the brainchild of the Tinner Hill Heritage Foundation and City Council member Mary Beth Connolly. In this Women's History Month, we note that Falls Church is incredibly fortunate to have had so many talented women leaders over the course of our 75 years as an independent city, some of whom currently serve on our committee, and we continue to do so, with those of you sitting on the dais. In closing, we again offer a special thank you to Mary Beth Connolly, who has been a guiding light to the Women's History Group since our inception. Should we walk up that way?
Safer to go this way so we don't trip over cables. Veronica? Andy, can you take the picture so we can get Sophie?
I'll take the picture. Yeah, Maggie.
Okay, come in this. My daughter says we like each other.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Look forward to doing this in May, warmer weather. Madam Clerk, do we have any oaths of office tonight?
I believe we do. I think Jeff is here. Sarah, you here? Okay. Do we have anyone else that's here for the oath of office?
I, Sarah Belden,
I, Jeff Pearson, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia and the Constitution of the United States, and I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as a member of the Human Services Advisory Council according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Congratulations and thank you for serving. Would you all like a photo or are you all good? Okay. Well, thanks for coming out. Are we ready to move on to public comment?
Yes. Let's see here. Okay. So regarding the budget, Robert Kavanaugh asked that sidewalk installation for Nolan Street be included in the budget. Viet Place Collective asked that anti-displacement strategies for Vietnamese cultural preservation be implemented and provided suggestions for funding sources. Regarding the bike master plan, Andrew Olison provided comments on the proposed bike master plan. Regarding development projects, Carl W. Anderson wrote with traffic and parking concerns about the proposed development project at Maple and Annandale and about the Quinn project. And Garrett G. supported the Quinn project and asked for pedestrian and bike-friendly improvements in the area. Regarding Park Towers refuse collection, the following residents of 200 North Maple Avenue supported a request to provide municipal trash service to Park Towers condominiums. Ann Bergeson, Yemsrach Desalane, Susan Langell McCaughlin, Mark Powell, and Bill Whitting. And on other topics, Gail Opitz advocated for a dog park in the city. Leslie Rye inquired about preserving a parking space in front of an elderly neighbor's home during several home building projects on Lawton Street. And the Planning Commission wrote with concerns about upcoming losses of affordable housing units and urged diversity of strategies, in addition to securing affordable new units in new developments to meet affordable housing needs.
Thank you. I think for that last one, there was a correction that was sent out. That was
the Housing Commission, right?
I don't think we received anything from the Planning Commission unless.
Thank you.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Great. Well, let's move on to receipt of public comment in person and virtually. Do we have any speaker slips?
We have a speaker slip from Robert Kavanaugh and William Dowdett from Midvale Street.
Good evening, Robert, and this is Bill. Thank you so much for your time. I really just wanted to thank the city. Letty Hardy wrote to us a couple days ago. Just so you know, we're on the Nolan Street calming group for Nolan Street, and it was proposed that a sidewalk could be put in on Nolan. And as far as we know, it's with the capital improvements program, but it's not on the budget yet. And it looks like it will be on the budget in maybe 5 or 6 years from now. And we were just hoping if we could move up that process just for the safety of everyone, really. I mean, because it's a pretty dangerous street to walk on. Or I would say it's actually very dangerous. And so, the sooner we could have a sidewalk, the better. And any real traffic calming measures for that matter. Did you want to say anything, Bill?
No, we also discussed speed bumps as a possibly sooner executed kind of traffic measure. As Robert says, the street is quite hazardous around the Blind Hill in the area where there's no sidewalk. We anticipate that that's going to get worse as a cut through with the imminent opening of the Whole Foods. It is a dangerous place, and our concern is mostly about school-aged children during commuter hours who have no place to go and are forced into the middle of the street because of the parking on both sides. It creates a dangerous and narrow funnel, and we'd like to see that not have any tragic consequences. So whatever measures can be done to effectively slow traffic would be really welcome.
Great, thank you. I share that concern. I run on Nolan. I run up all the streets off Columbia, so I do know that stretch of missing link sidewalk. I'd ask the city manager for kind of a comment on where we are with the sidewalk implementation plan on this particular stretch of Nolan.
So let me ask if either, Andy, do you know the latest on the Nolan situation, or Cindy from a traffic calming perspective? Not to put you all on the spot, and we can just get back with the neighborhood and just follow up with Jenna Brummond, who I feel confident is working with you, and follow up just on the timing. The message is we'd like it sooner rather than later, and that is message received.
And thank you as well.
And we acknowledge that, and Jen has been in touch with me, and certainly as we go through the current CIP and budget process, we'll take that under advisement.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have additional speakers tonight?
Next, we have Sarah Bailden.
Hi. I just wanted to bring to your attention that there's a community park in Falls Church, Roberts Park, which has one entrance to it. And in 2002, I think the city drew up a plan, and one of the first recommendations was to add another entrance. Because in theory, it's our neighborhood park, but in reality, it's a very long walk to that park because although it's got String Street and Poplar Street on the edges of it, we can't get in from there. We have to walk way down to Jackson Street and way across to Randolph Street, which doesn't have any sidewalks. So when you're with your stroller and your little toddler on his bike, you got to walk up the street to get to this park. And it's been this way since my children, who are now grown-ups, were little. And I've written to the council about it before, and I talked about it then. But I just think that it should be prioritized the way it was. Howard Herman Park, much newer park, would be inaccessible for people on Lee Street if they hadn't had the forethought to buy some property and then carve out a right-of-way. And so you can get to the park from Lee Street. That's what you need to do from Poplar Street. And there have been houses on the market recently, Lou Olam's house, which is being built. And there isn't even, you can see where there used to be a path that some people used. But it needs to be something so it's really a neighborhood park, because right now it's not very neighborhood friendly. And we want to make our neighborhoods walkable. It's not walkable, but there's nowhere to park around there either.
Thank you for your comment. If I could suggest either Rec and Parks staff, or maybe we could actually refer it to the Rec and Parks board to take it under consideration.
Yeah, I was going to say that. So Rec and Parks board actually meets this Wednesday night, and I'll be there at the meeting, and so I'll carry this comment forward, as well as other ones that we've received recently.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Flynn. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone else?
I don't have any other speaker slips, and we don't have anybody that signed up to speak online, so.
Great. Well, for the items on our agenda later on, you'll have the opportunity to speak if you want to during then. Let's move on to the report of the city manager. Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor Hardy and members of council. And I will just note on the comment from just a moment ago that expanding existing parks and providing access to parks is on the city's open space acquisition top priority list. So it would rank high. But, you know, there have been practical difficulties about doing that, which have caused the city to pause, I think, on some of those instances. But it is supported by city planning documents. I've got a number of things to report. I'll try to go through them briefly. And the city council is aware of many of these. So this is principally for the community's awareness. And we'll start with the city chamber's art survey. And following a discussion with the city council at work session several weeks ago, city staff is moving forward with a survey to engage with the public about art in the council chambers and soliciting the public's input on expanding the art or what types of things should be reflected on the walls of the council chambers to respect and to reflect the city's history, and ask some questions about what people's thoughts are about that. Places, people, stories, and we invite everyone to engage in this discussion. I think we've already received 165 comments on the city's survey response page. We've also distributed this survey instrument to all the city boards and commissions and are publicizing it through all city channels. So take a look on the city website, and right there on the front banner is a link to that survey. Second thing to update the community on is both the Virginia General Assembly and the United States Congress have recently taken actions on their annual budgets. So I'll start with the Virginia General Assembly. They have adjourned sine die last week after approving a joint conference budget. The budget is now before the governor, and the governor has until April 8th to act. And then it is anticipated that the governor will likely make some amendments to that budget. The council then will consider that in a veto session on April 17th. But what we do want to report is that there is some clarifying language in the budget addressing some of the stormwater funds that the city has had appropriated to it in the past to clarify how those funds can be used. That's very positive. Another thing that's important is funding for Metro Rail and Metro Bus. And that would help localities fund what has been termed as the fiscal cliff that our metro system is confronting as they emerge from the pandemic. The budget also has some additional funding for police, for K through 12 education, and continues to hold schools harmless for the cut of the 1% grocery sales tax elimination on the state side several years ago. So those are some of the positive things that are in the budget. One of the key things, of course, that people are watching is that there is no funding for the Capitals and Wizards sports arena. That is one of the governor's top agenda items, and so that is one of the reasons we're anticipating that there will be some amendments to the budget. On the charter amendment, that did get through both chambers and is now waiting for the governor to take action. And this bill, if approved, would remove any state advisory board member eligibility criteria and leave it up to the city council to determine the eligibility criteria for boards and for membership and appointment to boards and commissions. And that's something the city has sought for several years, and we think we have a good solution there. On the federal budget, just late last week, the Congress did pass funding for the coming year. The city has two things in the budget that was approved. One is $850,000 for affordable housing, which we intend to use as part of our housing acquisition strike fund. And then secondly, funding for the Hillwood-Roosevelt intersection in the amount of $500,000. That signal needs to be completely replaced and have a complete reconstruction of that intersection. The total cost of that project is $1.5 million, so we have $500,000 from this congressional action, and we'll need to work with council on meeting the rest of that. Fourth, I'd like to provide the community an update on Dominion Energy and reliability work we've had with them. In the past several years, we've had major outages that have impacted many residents in the city, including the City Hall campus. Cindy Mester has spearheaded our efforts with Dominion Power. They have come up with a conceptual plan to provide redundant power feeds to the City Hall campus, but also to the affected business community and about 350 residents that have been subject to those sort of clear weather, non-wind related power outages that have impacted that neighborhood several times in the recent years. So progress on that front, more to come. I do want to note that Maggie Redden is our acting communications director, and with that promotion after Susan Finarelli's departure from the city. So I wanted to congratulate Maggie and thank her for all of the great talent, creativity, and great service that she provides to the city. As one thing that we did during this interim period also is we worked with the police department so that the police department will have in-house public information services using Claire Casey as the PIO officer for any public safety, police-related emergency communications. So thank you, Claire, for stepping up for that role as well. I wanted to just provide the council with two updates from your meeting 2 weeks ago. You heard comments on speeding on Pennsylvania Avenue, and I want to thank Chief Fard. He did reach out to that resident, and as part of the citywide effort to make sure that speed limits are enforced and that the 20-mile-per-hour speed limits are also enforced, we have seen increased enforcement on Pennsylvania and many other streets in the city. So thank you, Chief Fard. With respect to the city taking on trash pickup at condominiums or multifamily projects, the City Council received a petition. This is a complex issue. Staff is researching this issue, but I do want to commit to the residents who signed that petition. We will get a written response back to you, laying out the facts and some of the issues from, at least from the city administration perspective, in response to their petition, and we'll try to get that out within the next 2 weeks. And then lastly, I just want to note that city staff are very proud to join with the council in celebrating Women's History Month and the Women's History Walk on May 11th, and that's a great team effort. But I just also wanted to note how proud the city Public Works Department is of the sidewalks that have been put in with those stories of notable women leaders throughout who've helped shape this community. And it's just something that I think everybody takes a great deal of pride in, and Public Works has been very pleased to participate in that. And also we're so pleased that city employees have been recognized in this effort, including Cindy Mester, Derica Wilson, and Mary Gavin this year. And so happy Women's History Month. That's all I have to report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Do we have questions and requests for the city manager? Ms. Flynn?
Yeah, so I had a question about the responding to the Park Towers petition. I know that a number of us, were interested in that. The city manager's, office had responded to council with some further information about sort of the schedules on which pickup takes place and, the different contracts that might exist for the various sizes and setups and logistics of different buildings. And I wasn't sure when you said that you were going to send a letter sort of following up, if that was kind of follow-up and continued engagement, or if it was a letter sort of disposing of the petition. And I guess I would just be interested in understanding, before we're disposing of something, kind of the decision-making calculus and sort of things like the budget implications for including increased service for certain buildings.
So my intent in responding would be to articulate current policy, which is to not serve multifamily with solid waste services, and to articulate the rationale for why that policy exists. It would be then to the city council then to evaluate whether you want to change that policy. And we would, if the council did want to take that on as a policy issue, we would provide as much information as we could to you on that. But it is and our research is not complete, but it is based on everything that I know to date, it would be consistent with city policy that's been in effect for a very long time, that the city would not undertake to provide solid waste services to a multifamily development. So that's the status quo. And so, if the council wanted to change that, that's another discussion. The other way to...
I guess my only reaction to it is that, the petition has been ongoing for a number of years. We sort of saw what cost implications may exist, but we haven't sort of had a further discussion about it as a group. I understand conveying the current policy, but I wouldn't want it to be conveyed as a sort of, the city council has decided not to take up your request or to evaluate it further. If you are communicating in the letter, that the city manager's position is this, absent further, action by the council, I think that's a message that is differently communicated than the city is, not taking this up and you'll have to come back and petition, once again, if you want a different outcome. So I guess I would just request that that's clear in whatever communications go to the building if it doesn't come back before council first.
Yeah, my intent would only be to provide an administrative response, not not declaring kind of a change of policy unilaterally. That would not be my intent.
Do you have other items? Anyone else? Okay, I have some items. So on the Dominion one, it's great that we're having discussions with them on some redundancy options. Do we have an update on some interim fixes to make the pole more visible, just so that it doesn't get hit until we...
Yeah, that's in process, and I know DPW is looking at that. I don't think that'll be a lengthy look. We do want that to be a safe section of the road, and so we should be able to get back with what we're doing on that pretty quickly.
Got it. While we're talking about poles down, in my run this morning, I noticed that one of the big Cobra heads is down at the corner of Maple and Annandale, right where the 7-Eleven is. I snapped a photo that I can send.
Okay.
As well as a fire hydrant at George Mason Square. So people seem to be hitting these left and right all the time, in addition to all the poles we already know. Mm-hmm. So I'll send a message to staff to let you all know about those. In general, I think we've heard feedback from the community that we're losing a lot of our street poles, and I know that was something that was discussed at the EDA retreat last week. Do we have a plan on how to address that from both a safety perspective? If we have poles falling down, that's certainly not good, as well as a long-term fix.
So we do. We've, I think immediately after that EDA discussion, staff has been working on this, but I think we need to communicate more in terms of what we are doing to address the poles that have been hit and have them replaced. And so we'll have that written response, and I think people will be seeing action on that.
Yeah, the ones on Park Avenue have been down for a long time. They're just kind of like deadheaded. There's 3 in a row kind of behind the spectrum that have been just missing for a while.
Yeah, that's a design issue that we've been dealing with because it's just too close to the road and the parks keep hitting them. But overall, there's a plan. And of course, there had been a period where we had a really long lead time trying to get our decorative poles back in.
Right.
So we can follow up and add that to the council request.
Is it going to be a CIP item? I imagine if we have an issue with poles across the city, it's a big enough investment that we should consider that.
I think this is a maintenance issue, so it would be in the operating budget, and it would not rise to CIP.
Okay. While we're on poles and lights, we had heard from someone from Gresham at office hours 2 weeks ago, and I think he had asked for an update. I think over email, we had heard from staff that we'll get a schedule on the Gresham light within the next 2 months. So similar to the Dominion question I had earlier, is there an interim solution for Gresham Place residents to turn left or right out of their neighborhood?
And I did, as you know, provided an update in the council request, which Zach Bradley provided, and I will be calling the resident. He didn't have an email, so I'll do a phone call follow-up. The work that we're doing with Smart City is the interim solution, and so we'll have a schedule within 2 months, and hopefully it won't be too far out. In the Smart City project, we're prioritizing that intersection. And as we noted, just so the public will know what we put in the council request back on Friday, is just last week, City Public Works, Arlington County, and BTTI staff sat down for another productive meeting to lay out the design and next steps.
Great. So hopefully it's not a year-long kind of solution for Gresham, and hopefully we'll have an update for them sooner than later. Thank you, and I've been very patient. And finally, to end on a positive note, the Mayor's Fitness Challenge is starting this Saturday, and while I'm not a competitive person, it would be really nice to win it back for Falls Church, so I encourage all my colleagues to sign up. I think it is also open to city employees, and so it would be great to get it to both city general government employees as well as the schools, as well as businesses. I had noted that Vienna actually allows all those groups, and we only allowed city residents. I think we're going to change that to make sure we level the playing field a bit. Thank you. That's it for me. Good. Ms. Connolly?
I just want to note that there was a Focus newsletter that went out that noted the comment line or the request line that was the highlight of the Focus. And I can't tell you how many people said to me, oh, I sent something in. Oh, here's something, I sent it in. So I'm hoping that all those things got spread out exactly where they need to be, and people will start to see results on those things too. And I'm sure it was a wide range of things that people put in there. But thank you for promoting that and letting people know that there's a way to put their requests in.
Great. Well, thank you, Maggie Redden, for that. And it is really good for the city to get comments or requests for assistance through that portal, because it allows us to track them, and also allows us to make sure that they're responded to. When they come in by email, you know, that's just a kind of an email, and we respond to those as well, but it is preferable if they can come in through that portal.
Mr. Snyder?
Sure, thanks. Just to follow up on a couple things. The Nolan Street request, and we'll make sure that that's discussed at the CACT on Wednesday. And what is the status of the sidewalk plan at this point, Mr. City Manager, and the implementation of it? And then secondly, I did speak with a member of the Arlington County Board on the Gresham Light. Are we moving to the point where that doesn't need to be further discussed at that level?
So we are coordinating with Arlington County. I think they are cooperating with us. The issue is getting the equipment in, and so that is, I think, kind of the delay, or that's where the scheduling comes in, is just to get the new signal equipment in. When those are long lead time items. We were in discussions with Arlington about whether they had surplus switches that we could just use, and that would have sped it up. I don't think that is the case, and that's why we're going through the Smart Cities grant to procure the new cabinet infrastructure that we need that will allow that to be a fully operating signal. So the bottom line is, I think I'll let you know if we need more coordination with Arlington County. My understanding is right now it is cooperative and working well. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that.
And the sidewalk, Nolan Street?
So I need to follow up to find out where that is exactly on the list of the sidewalk missing links. And I believe that sidewalk list, I know the paving plan was sent out to council, and as I was just going through all the emails that were sent out while I was away, I thought that was in there as well.
It was. I don't have it right handy, but it was in, not this week's, the weeks prior, council requests, but we can circle back on Nolan specific.
Yeah.
Actually, while we're on the paving schedule, and we have OCOM here as well, can we publish that? Because I know that there's enough neighborhoods who would like to know when their street's going to get paved, and it'd be nice for them to see the 3-year paving plan.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Final comments or requests? Okay, let's move on to business on the agenda. Madam Clerk, will you call the first item, please?
TR 24-12 is a resolution to adopt the calendar years 2024 and 2025 City Council Strategic Priorities Plan.
Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Hardy, members of council. So what's before council tonight is a resolution to adopt the city council's strategic priorities that came out of the city council's planning retreat that was held in early February, February 3rd. And it was a Saturday at the Mary Riley Stiles Library with great community participation. Board and commission members attended, and the city council worked hard to try to lay out what are the main things that the council wants to get done over the next 2 years. And that has been summarized in this document that is before the city council. We've had several workouts since that retreat, including the full council at a work session, and the Government Operations Committee did a detailed walkthrough as well. And so I'll just hit a couple of the key notes. There's sort of 5 big areas of interest from the city council of working towards strategic and constructive change for the community. And those those 5 areas are in the area of environmental sustainability, and transportation, and economic development, and housing, and in good governance. In each of these 5 areas, there's a statement of the desired outcome, and in each there's a number of strategies that will help achieve that outcome. And then in more detail, there's a tracking document that goes down deeper to the specific initiatives under those strategies that staff will work on, kind of more granular plans to execute and provide quarterly updates for the city council on progress towards those. So that is a broad overview. The city council's been had several meetings on this, so I won't walk through the whole document unless you request that I do that. I'd be happy to if that's your request, but I'll stop the report there, and happy to have any final council direction on this, and we look forward to working staff, council, community together on these really positive work for the community.
Great. Before I open up to questions and comments, one comment and then one clarifying question. So thank you for my colleagues for being open to kind of a different way of doing it. This is kind of broader than we're traditionally used to, so I know there are some growing pains, but it's an adjustment for all of us. One clarifying question, Mr. Shields. For the resolution tonight, are we adopting the broad PDF version and not the tracking document? Because the tracking document obviously isn't complete since it doesn't have initiatives under each bucket and strategy, correct?
So we're envisioning that what you'd be adopting is the outcomes and the strategy, so the broad document. And then the tracking document is what we will sort of stay in communication on as we make progress on all of those initiatives.
Okay. So don't consider the list of initiatives to be complete and thorough at this point.
That's right.
Okay. Okay. With that, who's got questions and comments? Ms. Underhill?
So I sent in these proposed changes for strategies specifically. We didn't have anything about solid waste. This also gets back to looking into solid waste at condominium buildings. So under environmental sustainability, I'd like to see an additional strategy of establish sustainable and equitable solid waste management practices that can also include something along the lines of our solid waste plan is ongoing. Another thing is for pedestrian under the transportation, I believe this was strategy 2. The policy adoption seems to be more of an implementation than a strategy, so I was suggesting to change strategy 2 to prioritize safety and connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists. And then the Vision Zero and Complete Streets could be a strategy underneath that. Finally, or 2 more, under, I believe it was the economic development, and it would be strategy 3. I would recommend changing that to actively recruit and retain local businesses. And then developing a plan for Gordon Road could be a sub initiative under that. That allows us more flexibility in terms of, we got the letter from Viet Collective, and so actively recruiting and retaining local business gives us more flexibility to implement some of their asks. And finally, under housing, I would like to change strategy 2 to expand new affordable housing rather than just building new affordable housing. That's all.
How do people feel about the 4 changes Ms. Underhill proposed?
Affordable housing? Justine, I was writing and I
Sure.
trailed you.
So right now, under strategy 2, we have build new affordable housing, but instead of just building, it should be expanding, because we're also interested in maybe buying down some units someplace, or offering 30% units other places. So it's not just building, but it's expanding. So that could include building too.
Other comments on the ones that Ms. Underhill proposed before we move on to new comments, because I want to make sure we track those. Ms. Flynn?
Yeah. I'm okay with all of those, and I also understand the expanding new affordable housing to go to things like with the new affordable living policy, like an increase in the amount of affordable units we're looking at and for in terms of a percentage of new development. So that makes sense to me. I would add one request, and we could change the wording or we don't need to. I just want to put my understanding of it on the record, is that in priority 1, environmental sustainability, strategy 2, which is on line 8, where we say expand green infrastructure, street trees, and open space citywide. I had understood the street trees to really be tree canopy, and street trees is a subset of that, and especially now with the 3 tree canopy related bills that I think passed in the Assembly, it would make sense to have that to be more expansive, as COG is also supposed to be releasing its regional tree canopy goals this year.
Changing street trees to tree canopy.
That's what I heard, is strange street trees to tree canopy. That works. Other comments or changes proposed? Mr. Snyder?
Just a comment on what's been proposed so far. I think they're all good, so thanks for that. Under good governance, strategy 1, I'd like an initiative to include training on conflict of interest and perception of conflict of interest.
So that one is tracking this?
So we'd go on the tracking document and not on the priorities document.
Tracking document.
Ms. Connolly?
There really isn't anything specifically in here about equity, and I think we need to say that, and it probably should go on page 1 as one of the overall priorities that council has, is to ensure equity in all areas, or we mentioned diverse viewpoints, diversity of views among staff, boards, and commissions in the community to ensure that all voices are heard, but I think we also need to specifically call out equity and righting the wrongs of the past somehow.
I like that. We add it as a 5th bullet, I guess, in the preamble
Yeah. Page 1.
on page 1.
4 bullets, make it 5. Yeah.
Ms. Underhill?
I guess when I was going through this document, there's a lot of things that the city does or needs to do, like we're going to be talking about our watershed or the sewer system, utilities, repavement, the light poles. There's some things, especially like the sewer system, that didn't seem to fall under any of these categories cleanly. And so I guess maybe this is more of a comment. I want to make sure those don't get forgotten somewhere just because it doesn't cleanly fit into a bucket here.
I think the language about this doesn't include kind of core services that the city provides, I think is kind of it's on page 1. Because clearly we're going to provide water and sewer and, and education and public safety things, right?
Justine, I also share that concern, and I think that I view it as captured in sort of the preamble of sorts under ensure that the city has the personnel and the infrastructure to meet needs and demand and growth. And so hopefully, that's a priority and a focus of this council in particular over the next 2 years.
Okay, I had a comment. So I'm fine with everything proposed except for I am not comfortable burying Gordon Road. I think that's important enough that I think it either needs to be standalone or pulled out. It doesn't really feel akin to supporting local business. It just feels different enough that just didn't feel like one that should be pulled out.
So then, in that case, we could make it a strategy. I don't know how many strategies are on there, but then it could be a strategy 4 or 5 for attracting and recruiting and retaining local business. I saw it as Gordon Road as potentially attracting or recruiting business to the area, but that could be a standalone thing as long as we have something there to encapture the Via Collective's asks.
Gordon Road is a big thing.
Yeah, I think Gordon Road, I think we're thinking of a kind of master plan of what we envision there,
It's a big thing.
kind of separate from business. Like
I agree.
individual businesses.
So have that as a new strategy 5, actively recruit and retain local businesses.
Yeah.
How do folks feel about breaking that out and adding a 5th strategy? Okay, I don't hear objections, so we're going to...
I mean, I guess we tried to do that in the desired outcome, successfully recruit, attract, maintain, support, expand.
Right, but it was lost in the strategies. And so there's no strategy that would address things like a business portal where businesses could write in if there's an issue. There's nothing about if you want your salad shop, we would go actively recruit for a salad shop. And so that strategy, even though it was in the outcome, it was missing from the strategies.
So what's the proposed strategy, 5th strategy?
Actively recruit and retain.
Yeah, actively recruit and retain local business.
I don't hear concerns.
I don't have a concern. I think it's just restating in a strategy what we're stating the outcome. And if that's
Well, there wouldn't,
clear that way, then let's do it. Add a 5th one.
my concern is that there wouldn't be an initiative directly specified for that if we don't have a strategy listed.
Mr. Snyder.
Just to move my earlier suggestion into either the desired outcome or strategy 1 under good governance, I'd suggest the desired outcome, the city government organization is well-managed, efficient, flexible, trusted, and proactive. Flexible, trusted, and proactive, and fosters an engaged organizational culture.
Okay, I'm okay with that. Other comments? Sure.
So what are once we approve this, what are the next steps? It looked like it would go to the boards and commissions again?
So in the resolution, the city manager is directed to communicate the high level to the boards and commissions and to work with staff and boards and commissions on more granular plans and initiatives that would fall under those strategies.
And city council would then comment on those specifics, or what would be the timeline?
So I had envisioned June for getting back to council with that, so get through the budget process. We have this in mind as the council is going through the budget, but then have more detail in that June timeframe.
Would council be able to submit ideas alongside of the boards and commissions? So if there's specific things that might...
Yeah, I mean, this is the council's work plan,
Yeah.
so, and so absolutely.
Okay.
But I will say that for this to be most effective, it will be a short list. The longer the list is, the more the less clear the signal is that the council is about your priorities.
And so it might be worth having some sort of rank order process.
That's all. So one idea, which I know is, again, in navigating this new way of doing things, I've suggested this to Mr. Shields, is whether we can do a deep dive by bucket to discuss potential initiatives, actually with departments, and hear back, like, this is feasible, this isn't feasible, and get input from us on a potential rank order. For example, I know Ms. Leon suggested, like, a housing deep dive. That's probably one of the earlier buckets. We all probably want to roll up our sleeves and discuss and talk about, well, what do these three, strategies really mean? What are the specific projects we really want to see? And so for staff to be there and hear that kind of thrust and initiative from us, and also be able to hear back from staff on, we can really only do 5 of these with the current resources we have. And for you to say, no, we can't take on more. I think that's an important conversation to have, that dialogue back and forth, rather than just exchanging documents. So I would just suggest that over the next several months. I know we've got budget going on too, but rather than wait till June for that response back. How do we feel about that? Your head down?
Yeah, and we could cover a lot if we were to do it in conjunction both with some meetings or work sessions and some in GovOps. And so you'd think about, being able to cover a fair amount of ground, or at least have some conversations by June, July.
Okay. Great. Okay. Any other final comments or motion?
Madam Mayor, I move to adopt TR 24-12, and let me see if this reflects the will of the group, including the attached strategic priorities, desired outcomes, and strategies.
With the changes we discussed tonight.
With as amended. Yeah.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Vice Mayor on the second. Madam Clerk? Do we need to hold public hearing for this? Any public comment? Okay. Closing public comment. Thank you.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
The motion carries. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item of business.
So these next 2 items go together. Do you want me to just read both of the titles and then you can discuss them together?
Yeah, if the city attorney's okay with that.
Is that? Okay. So I've got a couple long titles here. It's TR 24-13 is a resolution to initiate an amendment to the zoning map and zoning code of the City of Falls Church to repeal in its entirety Chapter 48 zoning, Article 4 districts, Division 14 floodplain districts of the Code of the City of Falls Church, to enact a new Chapter 48 zoning, Article 4 districts, Division 14 floodplain district, and to amend the zoning map of the City of Falls Church to meet the floodplain standards and boundaries set by the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the National Floodplain Insurance Program. And then TO 24-02 is an ordinance to repeal in its entirety Chapter 48 zoning, Article 4 districts, Division 14 floodplain district of the Code of the City of Falls Church, enact a new Chapter 48 zoning, Article 4 districts, Division 14 floodplain district, and to amend the zoning map of the City of Falls Church to meet the floodplain standards and boundaries set by the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the National Floodplain Insurance Program.
Okay. Mr. Shields, I know that there was an update to all the questions we asked in work session, so thank you for those. Mr. Bradley, do you have?
And so I'm going to just turn it directly over to Mr. Bradley for the staff report, and thank you, Mr. Bradley. I don't know if Mr. Rubin is online as well, or whether you'll handle the whole.
He has an ill child tonight, so I am running solo on this. I apologize in advance if I'm not able to answer all of the council's questions. But good evening. The staff report has not changed substantially since last week. We've incorporated council comments as well as the staff comments that had not been updated in the ordinance language. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through the staff report. I will reinforce that this does add some additional what we call higher standards. Those are above and beyond the minimum standards that either the state or FEMA may impose for the floodplain. Some of those are the increase in freeboard to 18 inches over 12 inches, the 5-year rolling period for substantial improvement thresholds. Right now, we do not have a rolling period, so we count it on a per permit basis. And then dropping the substantial damage / improvement threshold from 50 to 49%. That is the value of the structure. If you go over that 50 or 49%, it triggers bringing the entire structure up to the current floodplain code. So it still allows for expansions, some renovations, right? Residents can still live in their house and kind of do what they need to do to keep it a livable dwelling in good shape. There's some non-conversion agreement language in there. And then we clarify the fences in the floodplain and floodway. So those are some of the higher standards. Those are leading to additional CRS points. That's the community, I can't remember what the R stands for, I apologize. That's the program that FEMA offers that allows for discounts on the floodplain insurance for houses within the floodplain. We do expect, right now we're at class 7. We think with some of these changes coupled with some recent actions from the Emergency Management Office, we think we can proceed upwards and get a higher classification. So that's kind of it for tonight. I'll open it up to any questions.
Questions for Mr. Bradley?
I had one more for Mr. Shields and Mr. Young that I had communicated, and it's more of just a general question. So I had heard from a resident who submitted an inquiry regarding whether the sewer tank that we'll be talking about later on in the evening falls in any way within the floodway or the floodplain, and whether that complicates to any degree citing the sewer tank there. The resident was in support of doing so, but just wanted to understand the interaction and ideally would have wanted to see them kind of move forward together. But I explained the timing on this in terms of the FEMA review and the June kind of adoption deadline. So if you have any information about that, that would be just helpful to respond.
Yeah, so the underground flow equalization basin is a permitted use in the floodplain. It would have watertight manhole lids. It would have a kind of a, I don't know if it'll literally be clay, but it'll have like a clay sealer liner around it so that sewage can't percolate out, water can't percolate in. Depending on final placement, some of the above ground systems, which are generators and then some control panels, may have to be placed within the floodplain. We're going to do everything we can to keep them out. But we are able to put them in the floodplain in a worst case scenario. We would have to follow some of these new standards being proposed, some of the existing standards. So we would have to elevate the generators up into the air. The access panels might be a little higher than we would prefer them to be, but there is nothing prohibiting us from constructing that structure.
Any other comments, questions? Any public comment?
We haven't received anything.
Okay.
Move to adopt TR 24-13.
Second.
And the second part of it?
Yes, and move to grant first reading to TO 24-02. Refer the same to Planning Commission for recommendation to be received by council no later than April 19th, 2024. Schedule second reading and public hearing before council on April 29th, 2024, and advertise the same according to law.
Ms. Leon on the second. Madam Clerk, you call roll, please.
Before I call roll, City Attorney, is it okay that they vote on those together? Or should we have two separate votes for them?
It's okay to vote together.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
And Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Okay, moving on. Third item on the agenda.
So the next item is TR 24-11, resolution to approve an amendment to the Memorandum of Understanding with Wesley Housing Development Corporation of Northern Virginia for the purchase and operation of properties in the Virginia Village subdivision for the purpose of affordable housing and future redevelopment previously approved by Resolution 2022-34 and authorize the city manager to execute the MOU on behalf of the city.
So for this item, we have Brendan Woodley, who's participating via Teams, and Dana Jones as well. Dana, would you like to say any introductory comments, or do we want to turn it directly over to Mr. Woodley? And Dana, you're muted right now.
Hi, hello, council. I think we'll turn it over to Brendan. He's answered all the questions that were that came up last week, and I think he'll walk us through those. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Woodley.
Thanks, Wyatt. Good evening, Mayor Hardy and council members. I wanted to thank you for taking the time to review this request for the amendment to the MOU with Wesley for the Virginia Village project. Since you saw this staff report last week's work session, several updates have been made, which I will go over today. First, Mayor Hardy requested that we investigate the possibility of using ARPA funds instead of utilizing the property rental income as originally proposed. Staff was able to investigate and confirm the use of ARPA funds in lieu of rental income. And these new totals have been updated later in the document. Total ARPA fund contribution at this point is $1.1 million at time of closing. Second, it was requested for more clarity to distinguish city equity contributions from grant matching contributions for the Acquisition Strike Fund. To clarify, staff provided updated charts on lines 104 and 117 that present this information hopefully more clearly. And there's the other two charts we created. Third, during last week's work session, the question arose regarding the amounts of insurance that Wesley Housing would procure and have in effect at time of closing. Staff reviewed and confirmed these insurance standards outlined in Section V, subsection C of the MOU. That's attachment 1 of this council package. And staff will also review these insurance requirements at the time of closing when those insurance requirements need to be in place. And lastly, since the last submission, Wesley Housing had an opportunity to provide a final review of the MOU amendment, attachment 2 of this packet. And they only provided minor changes and edits. These edits, along with the edits included in the rest of this document, have been highlighted in gray in the second attachment and updated in this council packet. So that basically is all the major updates since the last presentation. As stated in the staff report, council is requested to approve the MOU amendment and authorize city manager to execute the MOU amendment document. I'd be happy to take any questions on this staff report or project.
Thank you, Mr. Woodley and Ms. Jones. Questions or comments? Ms. Leon.
Thanks, Brendan. Sally, I got a question for you. I know this is not a change, but I'm just looking at that language that wasn't changed, that was in the original contract, where we're referencing that there's a written notice of such default and an opportunity to cure for 60 days or such longer period. Basically, does that read okay to you?
Could you point me to the section that you're reading from?
I don't have a number. It's on page 2. Right above 3, CDBG allocation, the last sentence there around the restrictive covenant in case it defaults, right? In cases of default. And I think where I'm going there is, sorry if it was, I just don't want to make sure we didn't miss it, but we're talking about amendments. But it's saying there, a default is issued 6 months after you don't pay something. So the way this reads is that we're going to let it sit for 6 months. We get a notice of default, and then we're going to let it sit for another 30 to 60 days. Is that smart? That's a long time. I think we need to rein that in. So I just want to make sure that even though it was not identified as a change, I just want to make sure this runs through the legalese for notice to cure states like Virginia. and that we don't run against what we need to do when we cure defaults. And I don't think we should be sitting for 12 months waiting to resolve a situation of a non-payment or anybody defaulting on behalf where our money's involved.
Understood. In order to make the change you're talking about, Brendan, can you remind us what the timeline is for this particular MOU?
So the original plan was to have this confirmed before time of closing. Closing was anticipated to be at the end of the month. We might have some more time to kind of make edits. My question would be, would this constitute as a material change to the document and require an additional council review and approval in this case?
We need to protect our interests. So I just want to assert we should not be sitting and allowing 12 months, which is what this is saying. I would support the due diligence in making sure that, when we do this vote, we include the language that does not allow properties to sit in a 12 months of non-payment status before we do anything, which is what this is saying right now.
To the next meeting, right?
So if,
And as the city attorney is considering that, the core MOU and the changes that are before you are beneficial to have before closing. As Mr. Woodley said, it may shift a little bit, but you're canceling some May meetings. So I'm a little concerned if we don't approve tonight, and it's hard to edit a legal document on the fly that Sally hasn't looked at because 2 other attorneys have looked at it prior to her. But we will be developing the restrictive covenants, and those will have to come back from council, so we certainly can take note of this point and make sure before our restrictive covenants are executed that we've addressed this concern. So that would be my proposal. And, if maybe there's an amendment to the motion that notices the intent,
I'm okay with that.
Ms. Gillette feels comfortable editing this document right now.
Well, I don't love the idea of editing the document as we're adopting it. On the other hand, I'm not sure that, so if you have the sentence up, it says, it's the sentence that begins the restrictive covenant.
We don't even get a notice to cure by law until 6 months, so it's like really long. So sorry. So sorry.
Madam Clerk, are you highlighting that? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. The restrictive covenant shall also provide that Wesley Housing will receive written notice of such default, an opportunity to cure, provided that a cure is promptly initiated and is being diligently pursued, may reasonably be attained or secured within 180 days
By
following such
law,
notice.
in Virginia, anybody who defaults on a loan will not get a notice of default until 6 months of non-payment. So you can't cure it. So the start date on that is when you actually get the default letter, which is 6 months. And then it's saying that from that default letter, at least it's implicated. You don't really say when the default starts.
Oh, I see.
And then there's an opportunity to cure it for 60 to 100 days.
But I think this particular notice of default is a notice coming from the city. A default under this MOU?
Yeah.
No?
I would not use legal, that's a very specific industry term. So I think, either way, I think I would change the language. I'm a little confused if the city issues that. The city can issue a concern of non-payment status, which our equity and our properties are at stake. But, this is, I think, language around non-payment to a bank, which is Virginia Housing.
All right. Well, it will need additional review time and editing, and I would have to ask, I guess I see Ms. Mester's point. She's saying the restrictive covenant shall provide, and so if that covenant is still to be drafted, I don't know that it gives us much choice. So I think we need to edit the MOU.
That would be great. I was hoping you'd say that.
So I guess my question to our staff is, could this be brought back at the next council meeting on the 25th?
Can I propose a solution?
Yes, please.
Can we just delete that passage and just update the entire highlighted passage, amending the MOU, and then whatever restrictions we impose on the covenant, it won't be in violation of that or any kind of inconsistency for that?
Well, if you're going to do that, then you just want to reference anything around the restrictive covenant and just stub it out and say any restrictive covenant language will be reviewed and set up as a separate amendment, because it's not the only place you reference the restrictive covenant. And that restrictive covenant is very important. That restrictive covenant should cover, it should cover default, it should protect us, and it should cover, the terms, affordability terms.
I would say that I would say that if we edit this on the fly right here tonight, we're very likely to have a consistency problem or some unintended consequence, and we should take a look at it outside of this meeting and come back. So I guess the question is, what is the consequence of coming back on the 25th?
Is the council meeting still on the calendar for the 25th?
Yeah, so we weren't necessarily going to meet on the 25th. Let me just ask this question. So we're talking about a default on the ADU covenants, not on a default on the loan.
Either way, it's a default. I'd be careful with the language because there's very, very defined laws in the state of Virginia for default.
But so
I like the city manager thought this was talking about a default that the state has no authority over, that only the city has authority over, because it's a default of an obligation they owe to us.
So then we should specify that, because we don't specify that either way you got to change this so it's very, very clear.
Right.
What triggers the default, who's issuing the notice, and none of that is specified here.
But so what I mean, it's a little difficult to do this on the fly, but I think what we're talking about is if they're no longer operating the units per the covenants as ADUs, that's the default. And so then that lays out what the city does and what in the cure period. Mm-hmm. And of course, we would want them to cure it. Just make them, do what you said you were going to do by charging the rents at the AMI levels that you've committed to. Yeah. That's the cure. It's not that they have defaulted on their loans and they're losing control of the property. That's a different situation.
People need a cure when there's a breach of contract, period. If this is structured so that we're curing not so much the Wesley version, which was, by the way, still unclear, we still need to change that language, but if it's to the city's version on the ADU version, I really would clean up that language to just say you have up to 180 days to cure. It's confusing to say from the issue of notice of default, T0, you have between 60 to 180 days. Just say you have up to 180 days. And I got to ask, where did we come up with 180 days? Did we, just curious around where the policy decision was to anchor it to 180. And I'm sorry I'm asking this, but this language didn't show up in the version that we talked at work session, so I'm a little bit zinged.
Yeah, this is in the original version, and we're only amending a portion. And the language here came out of the stakeholder group a year plus later that had both parties. And so it's also been reviewed by Wesley and their attorney. So we also have to consider that we're amending their language in the EDA, so it's not just council as party to this.
So this language is 18 months old at this point.
Yeah. No, I get it. I said it I said an apology in the beginning of all of this, right? Like, I want to be really clear. So we can cut that language out to say, there's no need to to rehash that. I said it clearly. I didn't notice it. But, let's talk about protecting interests, right? I just want to make sure our interests are protected. I understand we have timelines. And I get a sense that we want to keep the velocity and meet the timelines. I do too. But I just want to make sure we're careful here. So my proposal is, can we add language in here that the restrictive covenant, well, really what we want to say is that the city will issue a written notice, right, of default. And by the way, what triggers that? Like, Brendan, what triggers you noticing issuing the default? Clarify for me, just so that I understand what we're doing.
We will receive reporting from Wesley on the status of their ADUs. We also are able to audit their reporting requirements. So as we will review that, we might be able to find if they are not upholding the
contract
restricted
obligation.
covenant.
Okay. So it's if Wesley Housing or an owner of the applicable property, if not Wesley Housing, violates the restrictive covenant, the city will issue a written notice of default and an opportunity to cure within X days is required. Can we just streamline that language then?
So I think what I would like to propose is if we could defer this item to the end of the meeting, and it would give me some time to take a closer look at what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And if you'll excuse me, I can go read through it, come back with some better answers, maybe even a solution, and then we can pick it back up at that point in the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Would that work?
Sounds reasonable to me.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for doing that. Do we need to motion? Do we need a motion to move it or reorder the agenda, or what do you all suggest?
I don't think so. I think it's okay. I understand the direction.
Okay. Do we have any other comments before the city attorney goes off? And
I had one comment. I don't know if Sally, I don't know that it's directed to Sally, but I don't want to further complicate the MOU. I'd like for it to move forward if we can and for it to stay on track. This, again, kind of goes to the sewer issue, given that I was looking at those materials tonight and the cost breakdown was in front of us. And so I support moving the $200,000 and using the ARPA funds instead of the rental income for the part of this MOU if we need to advance, those ARPA funds that currently aren't allocated or encumbered and want to do that by the end of the year. So my only concern is that if the answer to whether the ARPA funds can be used for the sewer project, given that ARPA does go to broadband, water, and sewer infrastructure, I would prefer in that instance, if we thought that those funds could be encumbered by the end of this year, to use the $200,000 of rental income that's available in order to have the $200,000 of ARPA funds available for the sewer project instead of, taking up further debt when we don't necessarily have to do that for like $200,000. So that may be a question on the allocations of ARPA funds, but it kind of all showed up in tonight's materials.
So first, to answer your question, it is our belief that ARPA funds can be used for the sanitary sewer purchase of capacity. Our due diligence isn't 100% complete on that, but we feel confident in saying that. So it is relevant, but it's also $200,000 out of several millions of dollars, so it's probably not determinative. The council probably could decide that the main goal is that we use our full ARPA allocation. I think that was probably the main impetus behind making that shift. And so I think the council can think about those two. You're not going to have to make a decision on the sanitary sewer funding tonight. although we would like to make the decision on the ARPA money for the $200,000 tonight. So I think the council might just have to take, without full information, sort of that leap to make that decision tonight for that $200,000 question.
Yeah, and that's I understand that, right? But I wanted to put it out there in terms of we were worried about losing that $200,000, and so there's this other $200,000 that exists, and so my
That's
concern
true.
would be whether you think you could be under any contract for the flow equalization tank by the end of this year. Like, I would rather use the $200,000 from ARPA and put it into this agreement if we were concerned about the timing of the contract for the flow equalization tank. But if we're talking about unspent ARPA funds, potentially moving some of the stormwater funding into sewer funding, and this potential $200,000, I think that we should be thinking about what funds are available and not thinking about the sewer infrastructure solely in terms of issuing, bonds.
Mr. Young, I think, has something to say.
So I think what we've been considering for the ARPA funds related to the sewer project would be the capacity purchase with Fairfax County. We will not be in a position to award a contract for the flow equalization basin in 2024.
That's right.
So, but we do anticipate, paying for that capacity purchase with Fairfax County. So that's the piece that we're drilling in on.
Yeah, well, I share the sentiment that we clearly should spend down the most restrictive first, which is ARPA, given that we're trying to close with the Wesley deal end of March, and we've got more time on the sewer one. And I think the financing gap is $14.5 million. So $200,000 probably won't make that much a difference then. And if I remember from Budget and Finance, we have other ARPA funds potentially available to talk about too. So.
Correct.
Okay. Any other comments before we move off this item? And then one clarifying thing. So thank you, Brendan, for clarifying the equity contributions from the city and working on finding a solution for the $200,000. Actually, two questions. Where does the rental income sit? Is it in our general fund? Is it in the EDA's fund? Because officially it's their property.
Those funds sit in, I believe it's 3 different accounts that collect the rental income. Those accounts are owned, 1 by the city, 2 by EDA, and are deposited in regularly by the property management company.
So about 50,000 is under city control, the rest is EDA.
Okay. Thank you. And then, so it's 2.3 million is kind of our all-in equity contribution between ARPA dollars, CDBG, the 1 million that we spent on 310 South Maple. What's not included in the staff report is the equity that's in the Gibson property. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's about $1 million because we already own that outright?
Yeah, the city paid $800,000 for that original property.
Okay. So 2.3 million plus 800,000 or so in that property. It's kind of our all-in amount. Okay. And then with the good news from Mr. Shields in his report tonight from Congressman Beyer, the 850 plus the 3.8 million, we have 4.7 to essentially do acquisition.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. That was it.
And for full transparency, part of the equity discussion has also been the city-owned property. That's Shirley Street in Gibson, so that would be part of the project as too. That's harder to quantify for this report.
Because we have mortgages on those ones. Okay. Okay. So we'll come back to this item, it sounds like, after, hopefully we have a solution. So thank you, staff, for working on that. So let's move on. I don't see items on the consent. Are there consent items?
Nope.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
Well, that makes it easy. Well, let's move on to the work session part of the meeting. So we have 2 items. We have a community center HVAC and then sanitary sewer financing. So Mr. Millard, you're up first.
That's right. So we'll discuss the community center project first, and then we'll move to sanitary. Both of these are important investments for the city, and we look forward to engaging with council sort of in a work session format. We don't need decisions on either of these tonight. We want to share all the information that we have at this point, have a discussion with the council, and action items will be scheduled likely for both of these in the May potentially for the sanitary sewer, June likely for the HVAC.
Yes.
Mr. Millard, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Wyatt. Am I controlling my own presentation, or am I going to let... Okay. All right. Thanks, Sophie. So my name is Lionel Millard, and I am here to give you an update on the Falls Church Community Center HVAC upgrade. Next slide. So to give you some quick introduction, and some of this I've touched on back in July, the original building was built in 1968. Most of the HVAC equipment is well over 40 years old and well past its design life. It's inefficient and a maintenance burden to city staff. Also, since July, we were able to do some test borings to determine that geothermal wells will be a viable option for this project. And to go over some scope, so it doesn't just consist of the geothermal well portion, but we're also demoing the old equipment, demoing the piping, the ductwork, the gym ceiling. We're installing new LED lighting in the gym, and this is on top of the LED lighting that's already been replaced throughout the building. We held off on the LED lighting in the gym for this project specifically. We have 5 new water source heat pumps, an air-cooled chiller, and then we'll have new ductwork, hydronic piping, controls, and then variable speed pumps, along with 16 geothermal wells. So the benefits of this project, it will reduce energy costs by utilizing the earth as a heat exchanger to regulate temperatures within the building for heating and cooling. And the geothermal well, or the geothermal HVAC system, also eliminates gas-powered equipment such as the boiler, which I will show you in the following slides. And it also adds more energy-efficient equipment to the building. So I wanted to go over a couple of pictures to give you some illustrations of what we're working with right now. So on the left, you'll see our chiller, and that light green cylindrical object is one of our compressors. It's one of only 3 that are currently remaining, which is an efficiency issue for us because obviously if you only have 1 compressor, it's operating at 100%, making our energy bills a lot higher. And on the right, you'll have the cooling tower. And one of the issues that we're facing with this is that the ductwork is laid out in an inefficient manner, and the ductwork has also been compromised. So in that bottom left corner, the insulation is exposed, therefore getting water and snow inside of the system, and also creates more problems for that cooling, the cooling tower. Next. So on the left, you have our boiler. This is the highlight of the project, I would say, because this is actually being eliminated, and this has a heavy gas usage that we are trying to get away from as part of our sustainability initiatives. So this piece of equipment is being removed and eliminating gas for the new or for the new system as part of the older building. And then on the right, you have the inefficient ductwork layout, which is located above the administrative area. So another goal of this project is to have a more efficient layout for the ductwork system. So this will be taken care of as well as part of the project. Next, please. On the left, you have the air handlers. So 3 of these are actually located above the gym ceiling, which is on your right. And also as part of this project, that gym ceiling will be removed and exposed. And I actually have a slide later on in the presentation to show you what the gym will look more like once we're done with the project. And another note that I would like to make is I think there's been some comparisons between our HVAC project and the high school's HVAC project as far as costs. And so one of the items or the middle school project, I apologize. So one of the reasons why our project has seen some cost increases is due to the location of these 3 air handlers. As you can imagine, trying to remove these large pieces of equipment buried in the ceiling like this requires significant temporary protection to the gym floor and the surrounding walls, windows, doors. So that's also a cost that's encumbered by us as part of this project. Next, please. So on the left, you see a very old single-speed pump. So one of the key elements of our project is that all pumps associated with the new project will be variable speed, which operate at a much more efficient manner. And therefore, when you do have lower demands for our cooling and heating systems, the pumps won't be operating at 100%, which, believe it or not, is a big energy draw. And then on the right, you have an example of the corroded fixtures or plumbing fixtures that we have in the boiler room. And a lot of this is buried in insulation, but this happens to be exposed, so it gives you an idea of what the condition of some of this piping is in. Next, please. Okay, so the comparisons of the 2 systems. So the focus of this presentation tonight will be on that system that's highlighted in the square. I'm not going to go through every single line item, but the overall project cost is about $3.9 million, but we obviously have ARPA funding that's already been allocated at $1 million. And then we also have a tax credit that we will be pursuing because of the geothermal aspect of this project, which should bring us back about $900,000 that we will apply for, I believe, is the next tax year? Yep. Yep, a year after the project's complete, so we expect to get that $900,000, which is about 30% of the project cost. So the net project cost is about $1.9 million. And then on the right is a system that does not eliminate gas and essentially comes in at a higher price total after you take out the ARPA funding, or I'm sorry, the tax credit. So the system on the right does not recognize our energy efficiency or sustainability goals for the future. It keeps us on gas, and also, yeah, I mean, it would take some more review of that system before we'd be comfortable presenting a number, but that's about what we would expect it to cost based off of our engineering estimates. So on the left, or sorry, so this slide goes over the economics and geothermal annual benefits. So we get a cost savings if we go with the geothermal well system of approximately $11,000 annually. A lot of these costs are savings due to the elimination of the gas boiler system, as well as the increased efficiency of the new pumps and water source heat pumps. So we will see a significant savings on our gas usage or our gas bill, and then another or additional savings on the electrical bill from Dominion. And then the middle row for operation and maintenance costs. So if we were to go with the other system, the gas heating and electric cooling, you would see about a $5,000 increase per year, or annually, and that is due to the chiller that would need to be added into the system, has some pretty substantial maintenance costs. So that is actually not recommended, and again, that'll be on our next slide as far as our recommendations. And then the carbon emissions, we're looking at an 11% reduction of the building's carbon emissions, and again, that's because of the reduction in gas usage. And then also the savings that we'll see from the electrical usage. Next, please. So here are, I guess, a good point of emphasis for this project is it's called an HVAC modernization or upgrade, but essentially, given the fact that the equipment is located or buried deep inside the gym ceiling, it makes more sense to remove that equipment out of the gym ceiling and put it over the administrative areas, therefore creating a much more pleasant and open ceiling concept for the gym. This also will include an LED lighting upgrade. Obviously, the gym will be repainted, the floor will be refinished, and it should look a lot nicer than what it does now. And if there's one complaint that I feel like I receive a lot, not only from residents and my friends, but also when I play in this gym as well, is that it's very dark. So the LED lighting will be a welcome or improvement. And then everything will be painted white. Sorry. No, you're good. Everything will be painted white. The roof will be insulated to also further our energy efficiency. And yeah, that's all I have for this one. Next. So staff recommendation would be to go with the modernized energy efficient system, which is the geothermal well system. It helps achieve the city's 2030 carbon reduction goals. As I've been saying throughout the presentation, it significantly decreases our gas usage and also decreases our electricity usage as well. It'll increase occupant comfort because of the addition of the BAS system. So not only will it be a better performing building for the occupants, but also be a decrease in a maintenance burden on our facilities operations staff. And then a little bit about the investment tax credit of $900,000. It's through the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credit. I believe this is a Department of Energy credit, correct, from the federal government. And this is, the reason why we're getting this is because of the geothermal aspect of this project. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the funding will be recouped through a tax credit that will file at the end of the project completion. Next, please. And this is a highlight of the schedule. So tonight, March 2024, I'm giving you guys this briefing. Design completion is expected to take place in the next 2.5 to 3 weeks. And then permitting will issue those 95% permitting drawings to our permitting department. That'll expected to take anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, depending on the comments. Once I receive my permitted drawings, I'll come back to you with the contract authorization. Hopefully, I'll get a thumbs up. And then we will order equipment in July because some of this equipment does have a long lead time. And then we're planning on doing the geothermal loop install in February of 2025 so that by the time we're done, we'll be able to repave the road once the asphalt plants open back up. And then construction is anticipated to start in March 1st. Again, we're working with Parks and Rec staff to really iron out that date, but right now it's anticipated to be about March 1st. And then construction completion in June 5th. So that gives us about 3 months, 2.5, 3 months to get construction completed. And the contractors, we've already worked this out with our sub-consultants and contractors, and they're very confident that they could hit that date to get us open and ready in time for summer camps. And then we'll apply for that, or we should be receiving that, the request for the investment tax credit will take place in the fiscal year of 2026. And then some of the challenges that we're currently dealing with is, again, coordinating with our construction activities with the timings of parks and recs. Obviously, the community center is pretty heavily used throughout the year with camps, the farmers market, rec league. So that's something that I've been coordinating closely with Danny and Amy to figure out how to best handle those logistics. And then space for relocating the senior programs. That's something, again, that we're also working with Parks and Recs group. And then the closing of the community center for 3 months. And then another thing is the farmers market. I've been working closely with Danny and Zach and Andy to kind of figure out logistics for that during the geothermal well installation, because we'll be taking that front drive aisle for pretty much 8 weeks. And so that'll be off limits for pedestrian traffic. They'll be able to use the sidewalk, though, in front of the community center, but the drive aisle itself will be not occupiable for a little bit. Next. Oh, that's all I have.
Great, thank you, Mr. Millard. Questions and comments for him? Ms. Leon?
Yes, thank you. Is the firm that's doing design the same as doing construction, or is that going to be a separate bid?
It's separate.
Okay,
Giuliani is the designer, and the contractor's a combination of S-Works, no facility solution.
Okay. So that contingency, you've got $180K for 2024 and then $106 for 25.
Can you go back to the slide? Mm-hmm.
Just talk to me about the two contingencies. What are we thinking is going to go wrong in 25?
So the first contingency of $180,000 is project contingency. The second one for 2025 for $106,000, that is an expected 3.6% cost increase due to contract renewals between now and when we'll execute the contracts.
So the contingency is a reserve in case we underestimated. That escalate to 25 is just what we expect. Can't you just hold it firm? Just say no when you do the construction contract? No?
No.
Okay, just ask.
No, it's a fair question, yeah. So what one could look at it as the $106,000 being added to the construction cost. That could be baked in. We wanted to show the additional cost for rescheduling the project for later on.
Okay. And when I'm looking at this schedule, the challenge when it comes to Parks and Rec, I would just ask us to really engage Danny on the planning of that, right? And when it hits, it creates the least amount of displacement. You start this in the winter, school's in session, there's no place for parks, for programs to go. It's still cold outside in March, right? So I just, I'd like to get this done, but I just want to make sure that we, support the programming and that we don't disrupt the services as much and put the children that go through Rexon Park in a situation where they're kind of getting the short end of the stick.
Well, so talking with Danny, his other best option would have been in the late fall, early winter.
Yeah.
So we'd still be running into the same situation as far as coldness and being outside.
So he didn't choose the summer, huh?
Yeah, no, because that's
Too many
summertime
camps
is
in
their
the summer?
biggest.
Highest volume.
Yeah, camps are huge in the summer.
Yeah, so, okay.
And it is important to note to what you were getting at.
Yeah.
The March to June timeframe is one of the very slow times for Danny in the rec center.
So that's his reasoning.
Yes, his other time would be the originally planned schedule, which was September through kind of mid to end of November, but we ran into some logistical challenges, community center being a voting precinct for two precincts, presidential election. We started running some infeasibilities that we couldn't quite coordinate around.
And this is full shutdown. Like, you can't wall off part, is it full shutdown?
Yes.
There's no,
Yeah.
okay.
We looked into doing an occupied phase construction, and not only did costs kind of get crazy, but safety. Yes. And also, if he wants it done quickly,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's always a trade-off. And we're pretty confident, like close to 100%, we can get that investment tax credit. We read all the fine language, because sometimes those are very tricky and prescribed.
So this is a new program, that the federal government came out. So this is a result of the city taking advantage of two elements of the Inflation Reduction Act. So the new direct, or I guess they've changed the name a couple times, but the new elective pay process, which allows state and local governments to get a tax credit even though we don't pay taxes, essentially. So that's a new process. The final rules for that new process came out a week ago. So, it's not something you can really look at and say, all these other people have already used it. So it is new, and the investment tax credit specific to the geothermal project, the proposed rules for those came out in November. And, we've kind of worked through those. We're not anticipating taking that full 30% credit on the full cost of the project. So we're looking at just the geothermal well and HVAC equipment costs. I think as Lionel walked through, there's a lot of other costs for the projects that may or may not be eligible, but we've kind of tried to be conservative with what we think we can get back. So, what's that?
So we just need to track it and get more familiar with it, since it's good that you just said that it was issued about a week ago. So, okay.
Yeah, so that's the best answer I think we can give you on that one.
Okay, I hear you. Last question on the savings. I wanted a little bit more punch on page 8. Are you sure you're scraping as much numerically on page 8? I was hoping for a little bit more punch on the savings.
On which one?
Slide deck, page 8. Yeah, operations, yeah, 5,000 annually?
Paying for your salary.
I guess without knowing what baseline is, it's hard to tell, to quantify. Is it 11,000 out of 100,000? Is it 11,000 out of 50,000?
Well, those utility costs, I mean, yeah, I would have to dig a little bit deeper into that. But essentially, the boiler accounts for half the gas usage. So the expectation is that our gas bill would be cut in half because of taking off 1.2 million MVH or MBTUs from the building of 2.5. And this was a number that we received from our consultant who did the return on investment analysis for us.
Yeah, so we had an external party doing some crunching. Okay, I just, particularly on that carbon emission, since we have, goals, I just want to make sure there's some fidelity with that, Zach, that we plug in and get us, there's a lot of money. So as much benefit that we can plug into other areas that are goals, from particularly on our environmental plan. And I don't want to create more work, but if there's, if we refine this over time and the cost savings just change, it'd be good to let us know, like particularly on those first two lines.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I also like to add that Spring Hill Recreation Center down the street is doing the same thing. And their building's about double the size of ours, and their project costs are also double. I think it was like 8.9 million. And they're at 38,000 square feet, and we're at about 16 or 17,000. So, I mean, it's pretty similar.
Okay, good that we have, okay.
Ms. Flynn?
I just had a few logistics questions. I know I'll get them from the neighborhood, and I'm also self-interested as one of the closest homeowners to this project. In terms of starting with complete shutdown, does that also mean reallocating or placing staff elsewhere? So are you moving like parks and rec staff out of the building? And is that any kind of, rental fees or space we may need to rent included in this 3.9 million? Like, is this all inclusive of construction costs, or is that taking into account like staff displacement costs as well.
So talking with Danny, he's on the same page where he's willing to let his staff work from home for those 3 months. Because, I mean, a lot of the people that are in there right now is Danny, Amy, and then some of the Parks and Rec staff and the front desk staff, and he said they can all work from home.
Okay. And then are there still discussions going on with the schools about how much of the programming the schools may be able to absorb so that it's not a complete shutdown of all programming for like this season?
Yes, and so again, one of the things that Danny's also looking at is instead of letting this whatever season that he'll be in at that moment, instead of running the full course of it, he may cut it in half or shorten it by like 3 or 4 weeks so that we can make that schedule. But him and his staff are actively working with the schools to see what space they can use as well.
Okay. I know you're probably on top of this. Given the age of the building, and there have been like interim updates, but do we have any asbestos issues at all with this work?
So we have money in the budget for asbestos and abatement testing.
Okay.
So we haven't done that yet until we get the full approval.
But you're thinking that that would also be included in the 3.9, or if
Yes.
you get us, okay, all right. And then for just the logistics of the outdoor kind of well drilling piece of it versus the indoor piece of it, do you anticipate like that the 16 wells would be drilled over the course of a month?
6 to 8 weeks.
6 to 8 weeks, okay. And you're thinking that it's still going to be in the drive aisle and you can fit all 16
Yes.
in the drive aisle?
Yes.
And you're anticipating that the large trucks from like the test wells, it would be that size and they'd be coming in from the city hall like driveway side, or is Little Falls going to be, shut down during that period?
They'd be coming in from Little Falls. Because some of those trucks, well, once the big drill rig, it'll stay in that area. But when they're removing spoils, they'll probably have the dump truck come up to Little Falls, the entrance off Little Falls, and dump them there. Just because there's not really much wiggle room back there by City Hall.
And I'm going to get familiar with the truck.
They'll have flaggers. It's not much spoils.
And then in terms of and we talked about this briefly, any issues with kind of excavation or vibration monitoring, or is this because of kind of the speed at which these drills go like super slowly that normally isn't a issue, even at this kind of 16 of them 500 feet deep in like this area?
Yeah, there's no hammering. It's all drilling. There'll be very little vibrations.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that's all I have right now, but if I hear other questions, I'll raise them with you. Thank you.
Yep. No problem.
Ms. Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Millard, for this presentation. It's great to see all these pieces of information. Couple questions. Wait, don't walk away yet. Huh? No. Thank you. And a couple questions. Okay, Ms. Flynn asked if you're still working with the schools, so I'll take that one off my list. I just heard recently about a E.B. Henderson mural that's going in. Is that going in before or after this? Have you coordinated with them at all?
A mural?
There's a mural, a recognition of E.B. Henderson with some lettering.
I have
That's an
not.
after?
I believe it's after is
Yeah.
what the Henderson said, because they figured that the community center would be
Okay.
freshly painted.
Where is the mural going?
In the gym.
In the gym?
Actually, I will follow up with the arts and
we can
humanities.
talk more.
Because my
Yeah.
understanding was that it would be sooner.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. I thought it was more of a quick thing. So
But
if you could coordinate with them to make sure that it doesn't go in
Yeah.
before, unless it's going to be protected.
I can talk to Holly.
Yeah. Who would I be coordinating that with?
I can coordinate on that. Or
Okay.
He can.
He can? Okay. It would be Holly or Irwin.
Okay.
You can, okay.
In Rec and Parks. She's the Cherry Hill Farmhouse
Okay.
person. Okay. And the geothermal heat is going to cover 100% of the heat in the building?
In the old addition, the new addition still has its rooftop units. There's two separate buildings essentially.
Okay, so the old building is,
Is the gym, the administrative areas, the art room, the mechanical room, the electrical room, the bathrooms downstairs. So pretty much where if you go inside the community center where the brick wall is, that side to the left is all new addition. RTU
Okay,
units.
and that new addition has whatever was put in
rooftop units.
20 years ago when
Yep.
that was renovated.
Well, that has the 2017 rooftop units. So
Oh,
those
okay.
will be up for replacement in 3 or 4 years.
Okay. So at some point, those will need to be replaced.
Mm-hmm.
Can they get hooked into the geothermal system at that point?
You would need to, there would be a lot more work that would need to be done because the electrical infrastructure in the building wouldn't be able to support it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can there be some kind of note in there to, once we get to that point, because those will go,
Yeah.
go at some
You would
point.
need more wells for that. for
Okay.
that. Yeah.
But you could do that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so that the new units are electric.
Yes.
Got it, okay. And then the electricity in the building is still being covered by regular old electricity.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So the electric in the building does get maxed out with this project, with the geothermal. So if we wanted to, as Mr. Millard said, if we wanted to convert the 2017 rooftop units to geothermal, we would have to add electric to the building. That is much more complex than what it actually sounds. The grid in that area, it's got a limited availability of what's left on it. If we go over that threshold, adding those components to Dominion system gets very costly very quickly. If we're able to stay under that maximum, in theory, it could be as simple as adding a panel. We do have to add a panel to another room, which means that room becomes an electrical room. There's some logistics in there we would have to work out with. But just so everybody's awareness, it's probably not just as simple as adding another electric panel in 5 or 6 years when we get to that section.
Okay. And then my last thought is, as you're talking about relocating programs, we're all just guests at Columbia Baptist's new opening of their worship center, and they have a lot more space. So they may be a good resource to take care of the senior citizens during the day, or even some of the student programs. So I'm assuming that's Rec and Park that's handling that, but I hope that they have considered Columbia Baptist as a partner.
That was one of the locations that was brought up during our conversations with Danny about Columbia Baptist. I said it as like a joke, but it would be a good idea.
It would be really convenient. It's a big facility, and they have their old facility that also has space. And then the other one is the Episcopal Church has space available also. So that may be another one to make use of.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Good ideas. Who else? Ms. Underhill?
Two main questions. Regarding the asbestos, so if asbestos was found in the building, that would eat into the contingency that's been allocated, or would that be a whole nother bucket of costs?
So our demo price does have that factored into
Just a minute and hear where they are.
Because the
I
only
see Lionel talking, so that's good.
Hey, Cindy, we can hear you talking. Thank you.
So we had, I think, 2018, I found reports of, or asbestos reports, and there's like a black mastic that is located in some of the mechanical room, and then some of the insulation had asbestos in it as well. So that was, yeah.
Okay, so those costs are already rolled in, okay.
Yes.
And then the other thing is, we've redone City Hall, we've redone the library, schools. Is there a plan anywhere to redo the community center in any sort of meaningful capacity? And I'm just also curious, would this fit into whatever plans we may have in the future?
So the next big facility up is the property yard, and so we do not have, other than this project, other major plans for the community center.
Who else? Mr. Steiner.
Thanks very much. So do we have confidence that this technology is well established and we have the capability to maintain it effectively? And then have we compared it to a combination of solar and electric? I'm just, sometimes this technology looks great until you actually try to use it, and then you find out that it really isn't as well developed as you think, or it takes really specialized maintenance that you weren't necessarily staffed up for. So Could you comment a little bit on what alternatives you looked at in terms of, replacing fossil fuels with the other alternatives? Solar is certainly one, and then electricity as opposed to natural gas. And then a comment on the status of the technology and the capability for maintaining geothermal technology.
Okay, so to the first point, as far as my confidence in the geothermal system, so as part of my onboarding of my consultants, when I was getting proposals, I was reaching out to references, and I specifically focused on references that had geothermal well systems installed. So there was the community center, obviously, in McLean. That was one of the references. There was another one in Delaware that was a community college where they had a huge geothermal well system, and every single person that I had discussed or talked to about these geothermal well systems had said nothing but great things about them. If anything, it was the systems that they were attached to, and a good example of that is the VRF system at the high school. Brian loves the geothermal well system. The VRF system, on the other hand, has been the thing that's been giving him the most problems. The geothermal well system up at the Spring Hill or Recreation Center, they've also loved what they've been dealing with so far. And that community college in Delaware also said that the system has been behaving phenomenally, and they've had theirs for like 7 or 8 years. So yeah, that's three people that I've reached out to with the geothermal well system. And then as far as maintenance costs, I mean, it's not too much different than what we deal with the hydronic boiler, chiller, and cooling tower. The only thing is that if the only risk that you have with the geothermal well systems, which is why we've installed 2 additional wells, is that if something were to happen to one of them, you would lose your I don't want to say resiliency, but there's a redundancy that you have to have with these well systems. And sometimes, like if you have like an earthquake or something like that, or if you have like utilities digging or utility work going on, somebody hits one of your wells, it can knock your system out of line. But we have backup options in place as far as maintaining heating and cooling, because it's our emergency heating and cooling shelter. So there's not much difference from a maintenance standpoint between what we have now and what we have going in. And then what was your last question?
Other environmentally friendly options that you considered?
So when we were, the original scope was to do an all-electric system, and then our consultant, he looked into solar panels, and then he looked at all electric without the geothermal well, without solar panels, and just using our existing infrastructure. Then he did the geothermal well system. The solar panel option was really expensive, so we didn't go with that. The all-electric option without the help of the geothermal well system was not feasible due to the lack of supply from Dominion, and so that's how we landed on the geothermal well system.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Okay, I have some. So you don't get to go yet, thank you. So building off of what Ms. Connolly said about, and I think Ms. Underhill as well, while we're at it, if we're spending $4 million, are there other upgrades? Because I kind of have deja vu with when we did City Hall in 2018, and we were talking about, are we really future-proofing this building so that should we need additional changes down the road, whether it's upgrading the rest of the older HVAC or additional space? Like, I want to make sure that we're not precluding other options down the road with how we're designing this now, or whether we should, if we're opening up walls, is there extra insulation or just other things that we should consider while we're touching this building?
I mean, we've already replaced all the lighting for LED lighting in the building, so that was one project that's been taken care of that I would have said should be done as part of this.
Not that I want to spend more money, but I'm just feel like it's our responsibility to make sure we are future-proofing this.
Yeah, I think for the building itself, it does serve as our emergency shelter. Sorry, I can't talk. Cooling or heating. So the system has been designed for that. To me, what it comes down to is we have the system in the new side of the building that is 8, 9-ish years old. I think anything to what you're getting at would really come down to paint on the walls, anything like that, right? We've taken into account insulation on the roof. We're kind of putting insulation back on any exterior wall, improved ductwork as it goes around the building along the exterior, trying to keep that a little more weather resilient than some of the situations you saw earlier. So I'd like to say no. Now, that doesn't mean something doesn't happen in 18 months and we want to add a expansion onto the building or something like that. But as of right now, I would say this would come down to maybe new tile, paint, kind of the aesthetic wearable surfaces in the building.
Got it. So nothing in terms of like capacity, like obviously, you don't think we need extra room anywhere while we're opening up walls and ceilings and, okay.
But for that, when you do have to replace those rooftop units, actually that solar panel option would be a good thing to look into to make up for the lack of electrical supply from Dominion service, I mean.
Yeah, so I would just ask that we just keep that in mind as we're going in. Like, let's make sure we design it and are thoughtful about what things we might want to do in 5 or 10 years. So you're not back here and saying, oops, we forgot about this. We need more space or we need this upgraded down the road.
Yeah.
'Cause I really prefer touching it once and doing it right the first time.
Well, actually, on that note, so the bleachers in the community center are really in bad shape. I'm going to leave them as part of the project, but I mean, they've got like holes in them and everything like that, and they're busted up. So that's if you're talking about things that should be taken care of as part of this project, it would be kind of crazy to make the gym nice and then have the bleachers all,
For a preface, those bleachers are in the April budget request, just so council is aware. That will be coming forward to you as part of that packet.
Got it. Okay. I didn't mean to make it as like a blank check. I just want to make sure we were thinking about that. Speaking of blank checks, how are we funding the $2.9 million? No one's asked that question. I'm surprised.
Ms. Bawa is here for both this item and for the sanitary sewer financing item that comes up next. So a plan of finance for the HVAC community center project.
So it's in the fiscal year 2025-31 CIP, and it's being funded by the reserves.
Okay. So cash.
Capital reserves, yeah.
Last question, that's logistics. I think you mentioned the drive aisle in front of the community center would be closed, and we talked about other impacts to programming. How about the farmer's market with that access being closed? I know a lot of people use that to get to parking behind the community center.
So what we're looking at doing is, because we have to maintain emergency service egress, so we're looking at taking that front portion of the parking lot in front of the community center near the bike rack. You know, I'm talking about coming off of that's park, right? Taking that and moving those vendors to the, not rear of the city hall building, but off to the side along where the parking spaces are for the community center. And so that's how we would maintain egress for both emergency vehicles and pedestrian foot traffic. Does that answer?
So what I'd add, part of the reason we've provided the schedule that we laid out with you this evening was to work around some of these things with the minimal impact. So the farmer's market in the winter is a little easier to navigate, some of these challenges. And we frankly need a little more time to work out the details, such as the question you're asking on the farmer's market. And the schedule allows us to do that.
Great. Thank you. Final questions or comments on this one? Thank you for the work on this, and I'm glad that the tax credits come in and helps us make this a lot more palatable of an option. So,
great.
So thank you. Okay, moving on to sewer financing.
Okay, so for sewer financing, in your packet was a memo. We do not plan to walk through a PowerPoint tonight. We plan to speak to the memo. And so in our briefing, we'll have Mr. Bradley will provide sort of the overview, and he'll touch on the financing. But then when we get to, at line 169 in the memo, where we have kind of the detailed financing plan for both the purchase and the peak flow mitigation vault, the plan of finance would cover both. Just kind of by way of summary, we'll have Ms. Bawa sort of walk us through the assumptions behind that and how that financing plan would work. And so for the community members who might be tuning into this discussion, just as a quick kind of short overview before I turn it over to Mr. Bradley, where we're discussing are two things really that we would need to finance. The first is the purchase of additional treatment capacity from Fairfax County, and that is directly caused by and related to development and growth in the city. What we're proposing is to purchase 500,000 gallons per day from Fairfax County, and that would cost $9.3 million. In addition to that, Fairfax County is requesting, as a condition of this sale of additional capacity, that the city commit to reducing our peak flows that occur during major rain events. And Mr. Bradley will talk about that and kind of what our history is with that. Our initial estimates to reliably comply with that request from the county, and I'm characterizing it as a request, but the county is trying to make it a firm commitment with consequences to the city if we exceed those peak flow amounts during major rain events. So to meet that obligation would be an additional $10.8 million is our initial forecast for what that cost would be. So what we're discussing is financing $20 million worth of expenditures out of our sanitary sewer funds. And what we'll propose to you is a strategy where we use a combination of cash from fees paid by developers, or availability fees, debt, and have that debt serviced both by availability fees and by the growth in our customer base that is as a result of all the development, such that we could finance this with normal sewer usage fee rate increases, tracking roughly CPI. We're modeling 4% growth per year, but essentially what we're trying to do is just keep up with inflation in that rate environment. So that's what we'll propose to you tonight. Look forward to the discussion. There aren't decisions needed tonight. We just want to go through the facts as we see them right now and get council questions answered and any feedback on these concepts. So, Mr. Bradley, let me turn it over to you. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shields. So as Mr. Shields stated, the Department of Public Works has engaged with the Fairfax County over the last several years to purchase additional capacity at the Alex Renew plant. Through those years, we've negotiated primarily based off of the normal average daily flow, which is also called the conveyance capacity. Currently, we sit at 1 million gallons per day. We're looking at making a purchase of 500,000 gallons this calendar year to bring us to 1.5 million gallons in total. Excuse me. And along with that purchase request, the county has also asked us that we manage our peak flows. These peak flows are primarily being driven by rainfall-derived I&I, inflow and infiltration. That's pretty consistent as you look at our kind of historical data. In the really wet years, our daily conveyance flow is definitely higher than on very dry years. So those do correlate. Both the city and Fairfax County have mutually agreed that I&I is primarily rainfall-derived. And to that effect, we are working on finalizing that purchase agreement with the county with the intention of bringing that to council in May for consideration. Currently, the agreement is from 1978. Speaking a little bit more in depth on the peak flow, the agreement allows for a peak flow rate of 4.3. We've seen between 6.5 to 7 on some of our larger rain events. Notably, the July 2019 storm has been our greatest peak flow rate on that. Since 2019, we've exceeded that peak factor rate 6 times. They have all been coincided with very heavy rainstorms. The process to enter into a new agreement started in 2020. Initially, we had focused on kind of a swap in capacity, using some of our extra Arlington capacity to get some Fairfax capacity. There was a lack of interest on the Fairfax County side to pursue that. So we put in a formal request to actually study what it would cost for us just to purchase the raw capacity from the Alex Renew plant. Sometime in November 2022, Fairfax County gave us some initial, I guess let's say preliminary cost ideas, kind kind of some initial guidance. And then in April of 2023, we upped our purchase to a possible 0.75 million gallons with the intention of still purchasing 0.5 million gallons immediately. Those costs were revised, republished, and then in May, when that was republished, that is when, May of 23, that is when the county started to link the peak flows to the conveyance flow, which ultimately resulted in the flow equalization basin that we're here tonight to talk about. Through those discussions, both the city and the county have partnered to develop alternative approaches. Part of that is the flow equalization basin. Other parts of that are how to address some of the rainfall-derived I&I throughout the city. We do have 3 sewer sheds within the city. We have Tinner Hill, Sizzlers, and Cedar Lane. The flow equalization basin will take care of the issues in one of the 3. It's Sizzlers. It'll take care of the I&I issues in the Sizzlers subshed. The Tinner Hill subshed is generally okay, even on those large rain events, not a whole lot of issues. And then Cedar Lane is where most of these alternative approaches have been being discussed in terms of how to combat the I&I. It's a very small portion of our system, but it does have a lot of I&I in there. Let's see. So that is all with the intention of capping the peak flow in the Fairfax County sewer shed at 5.38 million gallons per day. There's a chart in the staff report that kind of breaks out what that peak flow factor looks like based on what capacity we've purchased from the city and what we're seeing in our conveyance system. And it is a very difficult endeavor to fix I&I at the source. Right, most of it is coming from houses, maybe they're older stock houses from the 50s or the 60s where they were allowed to connect a downspout into the sewer drain. Maybe it's something else that's tied in that we just don't know about. But it can be very difficult to track that. Time is not our friend on that side, which is why the flow equalization basin is up for consideration. The downside to the flow equalization basin, it is pricey. Right now, we're $10 to $11 million on very preliminary conceptual cost estimates right now. We are due a final report this week. We would then, assuming everything is in line, I think one of the goals for tonight is get some guidance from council to make sure that we are moving in the right path. If those costs are wildly different in a negative way, so much higher, we would certainly bring up the, I think it was a 2020 study where we looked at a pumping station. If they're lower, I think it solidifies kind of the staff's recommendation of the flow equalization basin. But we want to make sure we're doing the best thing for the community and spending money in the wisest manner. So we did kind of combat some of these ongoing projects. We did raise availability fees last year. They are very close, if not exact, to the Fairfax County availability fees. They're similar to the Arlington County fees. Arlington County structure is much more complicated. We like the Fairfax County structure in this case. They're very simple, very straightforward. That helps bring our expected revenues up from $70,000 to $85,000, and that's what I would call the by right developments. So those are the non-special exceptions. Maybe it's a lot split. Maybe it's something in the T-zone, something along those lines. And over the last 4 years, just so kind of put things in perspective, the city has received about $8.8 million from those larger projects. That's Founders 1, Founders Road 2, Broad and Washington. Those are the special exception projects that generate a substantial portion of this money. So some of that money has been spent. We've done 3 primary projects. 2 of them are new sewer mains. One is along Mustang Alley, runs from the high school out to Haycock. Another one is what we had referenced as the West End sewer project. That picks up that Mustang Alley sewer, runs down Haycock, across 7, down Shreve, and down Gordon's, and ties in around Property Yard A, Vulcan Concrete, right in that general vicinity. And then the third project we did is the pipe bursting project, which picked up from the end of that west end sewer pipe and then ran down through Berman, down past Spring. Those have all allowed not only the West Falls Church development to occur, but they've allowed the Founders 2 development to occur. They allow additional development along their runs and kind of their service areas to tie in. They do account for future additional capacity. So the flow equalization basin being about $10 to $11 million, and then we have the sewer conveyance capacity purchase at about 9.3. Our total amount that we are looking at financing, as Mr. Shields had said just a few minutes ago, is just a little over $20 million, and that would be the expected expenditures to make over the next 2 to 3 years. So we have capacity for projects as well as satisfying Fairfax County's request to manage our peak flows. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kieran to handle the fiscal part of this.
Good evening, Mayor Hardy and members of the council. So just continuing along the financing plan, in order to meet our commitment for 20 million, a little over 20 million, we have 5.8 million in availability fees and some user fee balances that we already have that would require us to issue a debt for the remaining balance of 14.3 million. And we have modeled that on page 5, and I'll go over the assumptions that we have used to model that debt of 14.3 million. We have assumed that we'd issue that debt in 3 tranches in fiscal year 25, 26, and 27, about the 5 million-ish number, 4.3 first and then 5 million each. And then the debt would be a general obligation bond, and with an estimated interest rate of 4% with 20-year maturity and level principal, which we typically do for these kind of debts in the past. And then we are assuming a CPI increase on the sewer usage rates. It's about little short of 4%. We've assumed 4 at the current CPI that we're seeing beginning in 2025. And then the operating expenditures are increasing somewhere between 3 and 5%. The salaries are 5%, treatment costs 3%, and other admin costs 5%. So those are all modeled in the figures. And then availability fees rates in these assumptions in that column where it says availability fee receipts, models of every 5 years that we'd be revisiting these fees and some increase in there. And then assuming that we're going to use availability fees from already approved projects that are in the pipeline that Mr. Bradley just mentioned, and not assuming any other projects, the future projects that are going to be approved quite as yet. And then some new development paying usage fees, so assuming some of that money redirected. And then I'll bring your attention to the table on page 5. Cash financing, 5.8 million. Debt financing, 14.3 million. And then the one big long column, the first one is the debt service. And then in the availability fees, I'll quickly mention in fiscal year 2025, the 1.97, the 2 million number is West Falls Senior Housing, and then Broad and Washington commercial. And then we have in fiscal year 2026, the 490,000 is West Falls commercial space, and then Founders Row 2, and then Founders Row 1 commercial. And they happen over multiple fiscal years, so it's not like all of it is captured in 1 year. The bigger number in fiscal year 20, and the remaining of the Westfall senior housing is in fiscal year 27, the 112,000 number. Fiscal year 2028, the 957 includes the phase 2, the apartments in phase 2, and then the 787, the bigger number in 2030, fiscal year 2030, is the West Falls Phase 2 commercial. So other than that, if we look at, take our average, 5-year average on availability fees without any major projects, we're currently at like 85,000 annually. So we built in the new rates of the availability fees that we just increased last year. So based on that, we'd be, we're assuming a 90,000 from average availability fee receipts for the first 5 years, and then increasing it to 95,000, 100, and 105. That's what I mentioned, that we would be revisiting our availability fee rates every 5 years. And then the next column, which is the second from the right, is the usage fees from new developments that are going to come on. And we built it like staggering up all the way, building capacity, and then we don't need the full capacity of 800,000 as we move along. But then again, I do want to mention that there may be a need for more capacity down within the 20 years that we're showing for the life of the loan. We may need another quarter MGD down. So, and the last column shows the availability fees, how it's drawing down as we pay down the debt service, and the receipts of the availability fees from the existing projects that are in the pipeline. So this is all in addition to the reserves that we have. The capital reserve is 400,000 in the sewer fund, and the operating reserve is 1.1 million, and that's called out by the policy. So this is in addition to that. That was modeling the full balance that we need in addition to the cash that we have right now. Other options that we are going to continue to explore as we see, get more guidance on the types of fundings that we have in the pipeline. We could, there is a possibility of redirecting, like we talked at the earlier item, redirecting some of the ARPA funding should the 9 million in the state budget become available for stormwater. So we have up to somewhere between 1 and 3 million that we can redirect for this project. And the capacity is eligible under the guidance that we received from EPA, so it's moving in the right direction. And then another possibility, we will bring you the CIP that was presented to the Planning Commission, which uses a good chunk of our capital reserves over a 6-year window. However, we could take a temporary loan from the general fund, possibility, and then pay it back with availability fees that are we're expecting and that are shown in the table in fiscal year in the next 3 or 4 fiscal years, and then pay back that. We could take up to a 4.1 million loan, and then future availability fees based on other projects that are not in the pipeline yet. We could look at either modeling that or look at maybe some things become more clear in the coming months. So those are some other funding sources that could be considered as we move along to reduce the debt issuance amount if we needed to. And that concludes my description of the funding plan that we have as of now. It is a thing that will keep evolving as we get to hear more on the funding sources, the eligibilities, and other projects where we can try to use up funding, use up more funding that has a time constraints, restricted funding as first, and then the discretionary funding as we move along. So I'll stop there. Mr. Bradley.
Thank you, Ms. Bawa. So as I said earlier, we do intend to come back in May of this year with that purchase agreement with the county. That'll have a very well-defined kind of how are we going to treat our infiltration throughout the city, looking at that from each sewer shed versus the whole subshed of Fairfax. As Ms. Bawa said, there is $9.3 million for capacity purchase, about 10.8 for the flow equalization to get us this infrastructure that we need to continue development. And we're going to finance between debt and cash. Let's see, and then we are also looking at some other funding options. So I know ARPA was mentioned earlier. We're still working through some of those questions. We intend to have a solidified answer of the stormwater project schedules and what that means for any ARPA money availability for this purchase. Probably by the end of this month. We got a couple meetings this week, and those might be ongoing as we kind of fine tune that. So I don't have anything solid for council tonight, other than let you all know that we are looking at that as an option. And then as a note, any bond issuance that we do choose to proceed with, council does have to authorize. You are not being asked to authorize that tonight or anything like that. So we would do that concurrently with that purchase agreement with Fairfax County. There are several attachments and several reference items that are in here I did not cover. I'm happy to field questions on them, but I'll turn it over to you all for questions.
Great, thank you for that very thorough staff report. Questions, comments? Sure we have some. Sandriel?
So I do have some areas of clarification. You mentioned there were about six times that we went above our peak flow of 4.3 mega gallons daily. Is that correct?
The million gallons.
Million
per day,
gallons.
yes.
Okay, excuse me, million gallons. How did, in those six times you mentioned, at least one of them, we went up to 6.5 to 7. Did we generally go above 5.38 for those other 5 times?
Yes, we did. So those 6 times we exceeded that 5.38 million gallon peak capacity that were allotted. We actually have the numbers. I don't think we have them tonight. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I don't think we have the numbers of what those peak flows were from those storm events tonight, but if council's interested, I believe we have that data.
Okay, I would be curious. So then what we're trying to solve for here is specifically those 6 times that we went above the amount, or is it we're expecting to see larger amounts of I&I in the coming years?
So it would be the 6 times that we exceeded it. I'll turn it over to Mr. Dalton if he would like to elaborate, but I will note that the flow equalization basin is right when a rain event would generate enough I&I to go over that 5.3, that basin will capture it and then slowly discharge it. And the design is based off of that 6.5 to 7. I'll turn it over to you for
Alan Dalton, Department of Public Works. So what I have is the information for Sisslers, which is the sewer subshed that we have problems in. So we've had a good run in the last 20 months or so where we've been under it, but we haven't had the big rain for it. So what we've had is every time there's a major storm, which would be, March 2018, May 2018, July 2019, where we actually exceeded the meter capacity, and they're of 10 million gallons per day, but they consider that a fluke. And then 2020, 2021, all consistent with a major storm. So when we get a major storm, we go over our limit. So even though so that's not good enough with Fairfax County, just not to go any higher. We've got to reduce it to offset the new capacity that we're buying. So we have to reduce our peak factor from 4.3, which it never really was. It was always above that, but they allowed us to down to 3.6 or 3.1 as we continue to buy more capacity. And that's what the flow equalization basin does.
So I actually have a question about peak factor. My understanding is that the additional treatment capacity for, let's say, places like Founders Row, that is fairly well insulated. So whatever is built for a new development, there really isn't, from that site, by the time it connects to the rest of the lines, there really isn't much I&I Is there any INI from that short?
There was always some. The threshold is 100 gallons per day per inch diameter of pipe per mile. Doesn't mean anything to anyone, except that there is some, because if we're using concrete pipe or any pipe has some amount of leakage at the joints for it. But you're correct. For the new development, there should be no significant increase in INI. However, when we're talking, the sewage flow doesn't occur constantly over a day. There is, it's called diurnal variation, probably mentioned in there, where there's a peak in the morning when people get up and take showers, there's a peak in the evening, and then throughout the middle of the night, there's not much flow. So we're always going to have a peak factor greater than 1. It's going to be 2 or 2.5, something like that.
But in terms of, the average, the amount that we're buying for additional capacity shouldn't necessarily increase our peak flow by a huge amount.
Should increase it by some, but not what we're experiencing now.
And so the main issue that we're solving for with the peak flow is for older units that are, or like INI in corroding pipes or joints and stuff like that elsewhere in the system.
It's we're solving the problem that we already have.
So is that problem expected to get worse or better over time? We're going to have larger rainstorms, but then I also imagine that these houses that are pumping in water into the system are going to get redone. And so I'm wondering what happens in 10 years?
So as redevelopment occurs, the I&I situation should get better. Full transparency, it can be hard to gauge what that means, right? We have more capacity usage from bigger building, more usage. What I can say is a lot of these events that we're designing to, they blow manhole tops off of manholes now, which generally indicates those sewer mains are running full. They can't take any more. So even if we had 25, I'm going to use the July 2020 storms, which was a little less than the 2019 storm. This basin can handle all of those. It can't necessarily handle them on successive days, right? We'll run into issues if that basin can't discharge in its 24-hour period. But those storm events, it will be able to handle, in theory, 1 every 24 hours for a frequency rate. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but that's kind of a conceptual level what you're getting at, right? If the mains are running full, we can't necessarily take on any more I&I. So I don't know.
Do we need to repair the old pipes that have a ton of I&I right now? Like, would that need to be an investment alongside?
We have. Okay. So I think it's been about 20 years, long before I was with the city, we started a sewer main lining rehab program. That was, at the time, primarily focused on mains that were collapsing, getting clogged, chunks getting stuck in them. That program, coincidentally, also sealed up the sewer mains to prevent I&I from getting directly into the mains. We're continuing that program. I think we're on phase 12, which completes the original 12 phases that were designated. What we're moving to and what we're talking through with Fairfax County is focusing on Cedar Lane for a year or two to get manholes, sewer pipes, anything that's remaining in that subshed relined, and then we'll re-engage on the sewer relining. We'll add manhole relinings to that so that we can further reduce the I&I that's getting into the system.
But the amount of I&I that's reduced from those relinings would not be enough on its own?
Probably not, no. If you look at, talk to Cedar Lane in particular, if you look at Cedar Lane, it is very evident that there are downspouts and sump pumps tied in to sewer laterals and ultimately the sewer main. We're not fixing those issues, and that is what causes most of our that subshed in particular has a whole lot of I&I problems, and it's even on just light rains where we don't have peak flow factors on Tinner and Sizzlers. We do run into peak flow factors in Cedar Lane, so we're going to try and solve it all through relining of sewer mains and manholes in that subshed. Chances are there's going to have to be something else in there that addresses that. because of those downspouts and sump pumps that are tied in.
And I wasn't clear from the document. We don't necessarily have the legal authority to go in and actually, it seems like it might be cheaper than building this entire thing to go and fix the individual issues.
So it is an option. Yeah, we are looking at standing up a disconnection program. We're currently evaluating. I know a couple surrounding jurisdictions have them. We're currently evaluating feasibility, legalities. Mr. Shields, I saw you turned on your mic. I'll turn it over to you if you have anything to add.
I think we've been exploring that. It would be great if we didn't have to build the basin and we could just solve it all at the source. I think the bottom line is staff is concerned that we would not be able to reliably get there within a set amount of time. A lot of these are, one, hard to detect, and then two, when you do detect them, we would need to stand up a program, make sure we have proper legal authorities, which we think we have, but we've never exercised them before, and a lot of local governments, I think, have struggled with it to force homeowners to fix these things. That's a difficult undertaking, and so many localities, when they've confronted this, they have gone with the vault that we're talking about, as opposed to trying to get it at the source. But we understand the question, and we understand it would be better, I think, for society if we could do it, at the source. But we're just concerned if there are going to be strict sanctions against the city, that we need something that we feel very confident is going to solve the problem, and the vault would be the way to go, we think.
And what are the consequences now and in the future if we go above 4.3, I guess now, or 5.38 in the future?
So those are still being negotiated, and so the things that have been discussed would be fines, a moratorium on new connections. Those are all things that we have not agreed to, but we're still negotiating. The bottom line is the county would like to have clear consequences if there is an exceedance or repeated exceedances of the cap.
What about for the 6 times that we did go over? What happened?
Currently, there is no consequence.
Okay.
And so that's, really what the essence of what's happening here is the county has wanted to address this, and the discussions we're having about our need to purchase more capacity has prompted this discussion of having sort of firm commitments to not exceed.
Gotcha. Okay, I think that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Ms. Connolly? Just a quick one. I was looking for a map. Did you have a map when we looked at this in the work session? Like, where is the Tinner Hill Sewer Shed? Where is Sizzler's? Where is Cedar Lane?
We did. It's not in here. It will be in the May presentation when we bring that agreement to you. We wanted to focus tonight primarily on how we're going to fund this.
And do we only have 3 sewer sheds in the whole city?
So we have a Fairfax County and an Arlington sewer shed. All of Arlington goes to I'm not quite sure actually where Arlington goes to, so I'm going to back off on that.
Fine.
But the Fairfax County sewer shed has 3 subsheds. Sizzler's, Tinner, and Cedar Lane. Those are the only.
So then what we did for the high school along Route 7, that's in Cedar Lane?
I think it's in Sizzler's.
That's in Sizzler's, all right.
So almost all of the development is going to be both in the Sizzler's and in the Tinner Hill.
Okay.
Yes.
Sizzler's is 80% of the sewer shed, so that's where most of it is. That's where all of West Falls is. Anything on West Broad Street is in the Sizzler's sewer shed. But parts of the city center project would naturally flow down the Tinner Hill subshed. But that's where we're talking about having the capacity to pump over to Arlington County.
Okay.
So that might not have as much growth if we take that up.
Okay.
For some additional context, Cedar Lane is it's along Hillwood, and it runs from, I think it's now a Sonesta, used to be a Marriott hotel, down Hillwood towards Seven Corners. There's not a whole lot of customers on it. I can't remember the total count. But it's 5% of our total use in Fairfax County, so it's a very small area.
I'll look back to see the map. I'll look back to see the map from last time. Thanks.
Mrs. Scott?
I just wanted to interject a quick comment or opinion on the financing. I know you're discussing additional layers of it, but I certainly would like to see all of those, fully fleshed out before looking at debt financing. It seems, and with specifically with regard to the reserves we have and what we're looking at with whether it's for housing or how we're using ARPA, how we're using our reserve funds, because just off the top of my head and remembering what percentage we were pretty significantly above our minimum targets. So when we come back to discuss that as an option, I'd like to see that, fully thought out, and just wanted to interject that. And in between the discussions of flows, I wanted to throw some opinions on the numbers.
Completely agree. We should have ARPA sorted by the end of the month. And then I think all of this is in the I'm going to get my years confused, FY25 CIP. So there'd be an ongoing discussion as that's presented to council as well to better flesh that out.
Thank you.
Ms. Leon?
Zach, I'd love to be able to waterfall or just get a better understanding for, here's the 3 tranches. What is it paying for each? What is each tranche paying for? Something that says 2025, 4.3 million. Assessment and making, design or something. So I think just some milestones-based deliverables for that 4.3, for the tranches. And I think I just want to ask, are we asking, is the timing to do annual releases of each launch appropriate? Like, is it aggressive given the pace and complexity of this, that you're going to burn through the 4.3 in a year? So I just ask that you time that debt financing, because it's aggressive to do 3 tranches back to back. There's no hedge on schedule. Yeah, so.
And that's part of the reason why we don't have the timeline on there yet, is we're still trying to put a definitive timeline to the engineering and construction schedule. So we get the conceptual feasibility study this week, and we can start better developing how long it takes for engineering, how long it's going to take for for construction. The first tranche of, I can't remember what it is without digging through 100 pages.
4.3 is the first tranche.
So the first tranche of 4.3 in conjunction with and the 5.8 is for the 9.3 million in availability purchase. The second 2 tranches were staged with the idea that we don't quite know when we're going to have engineering done. So we don't know if, right, at some point we need money for engineering, but we're also not going to quite be to construction. So there's going to be some time period in there where we need additional money above the 4.3, but we're not ready for the full 10 million or 10.8 million in construction. So that's kind of why the second 2 tranches are there. And for convenience of this, we just split it.
And I think my second question is looking at the available, the fee receipts as part of this equation. So I'd love to be able to see some analysis, right, around, as an option. Sure, the city can take out debt. We've got, a great bond rating. But have we explored adjusting our availability of, increasing the fee receipts, right?
Yeah,
To help subsidize this.
So we will be looking at those on a regular basis. The intent is that availability fees should cover these types of expenditures. And so that's the bottom line. We are coming up short. That's why we're having this discussion about financing it. What's before you is a financing plan. There's many iterations on this theme, but this is one that would meet some deadlines that we we want to hit for constructing the vault. Of course, what drives the first tranche is to purchase the capacity, which we do want to do.
The $9 million,
The second 10 million, those are going to be driven by more detailed engineering and scheduling. But the thought is, let's not take on the debt until we absolutely have to. The availability fees, we'll look at them, and we will be increasing those. I think we can guarantee that, but we want to do that with some analysis behind it to make sure we're covering our costs.
And I'm sorry, if I could, I'll add to that. The way this is structured is making the assumption that council doesn't approve any additional like special exception processes. Not that we all don't want you to approve those, but we don't want council to feel obligated to approve a project to pay for something that's already on the books. So increasing the fees for purposes of what we're talking about and what we're presenting tonight, they don't change the fiscal analysis, right? We don't want unapproved projects to be considered in the fiscal analysis of that. As this develops, right, so 10 months from now, if we go to take that first debt funding, and we've received or we've approved projects for another $5 million in availability fees, then we would not take $5 million in debt. So that this plan would change based on what is approved over the next few months, but we wanted to present something that doesn't obligate council to approve anything.
Okay, so Wyatt, maybe I should ask this another way. When is the availability fee rate up for review next?
We will be looking at potential changes as part of the FY budget. And, we've been tracking Fairfax County's fees. And so one simple thing to do is if they're raising theirs, then we would raise ours. If we're going to separate from Fairfax County fees, we should have some analysis that backs up and justifies the fee level. And so if Fairfax County is not adjusting theirs this spring, we will probably take some months to do that analysis, and we would come back to the council at a later date to adjust those fees.
Okay, so we are open to balancing kind of, the cash financing through availability fees, and we're open to exploring that based on the analysis, which I'm hearing you're about to do this year. Even though Fairfax County is holding theirs firm, which I don't know if I want to benchmark it.
On that.
I'm sorry.
I think Mr. Bradley's point that he made just a moment ago, the availability fees, adjusting those is not going to dramatically change this picture. And the reason for that is that we're not making assumptions that the big projects are going to be approved. That would change these numbers. And that's where an increased fee would be very important as well. So we need to do that analysis, and we'll bring that to you. But that's not likely to change this number, which is to modeling projects already kind of in the pipeline. Not speculating about other ones that are not already approved.
Okay. So how does the timing of the Quinn development and their sewer contribution fit into all of this?
So, one of the main reasons we've wanted to have the pump station is that buys us some additional time. We have capacity in the Arlington County sewer shed. And so if we take the Quinn project and have their availability fees, instead of going into this pot, but instead going into a pump station, that $2 million into the pump station and the force main allows us then to have other projects in the city center area use that same facility, and that would buy us some additional time before we need to buy more capacity from Fairfax County. That's kind of the main virtue of that approach. As we know, that capacity is expensive, and so if you have excess capacity that's not being used, there is value in having a pump station that helps us use it.
And I'll add to that. If you look at the city's projections of sewer needs in Fairfax, the Fairfax subshed through 2050, We need, I think, 2.3 million gallons per day without the flow equalization or the Quinn's force main diversion. Depending on how everything balances out, we could see upwards of 500,000 gallons a day that would have gone to Fairfax going to Arlington. Again, we have to still work through Arlington on that upwards number. But if we're able to maximize that, that drops that total need in the Fairfax County sewer shed to about 1.8. And what we're proposing with the flow equalization basin would allow us 1.75. So we are very, very close on our numbers of what this basin will allow us to do and what that force main will allow us to do.
So let me rephrase it, make sure I understand it. So the answer to how the Quinn project interplays with this is that specifically in that projection you're saying that you need as of 2027 onward to purchase an additional 0.25 million gallons of capacity, Quinn will defer the need to make that purchase.
Quinn's may defer the 0.25 MGD purchase a few years. What we do know is that we will need to make that 0.25 MGD purchase at some point in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, but not exactly at 2027.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
All right.
Okay, who's next? Aaron?
So I'll commend staff for the work on this. It looks like there's been work going into this for years. So thanks for that. It looks like since at least 2019, we've been aware, right, of this issue and the need to purchase the 0.5 million gallons per day. And so, yes, we need to be forward-looking. Yes, this is a huge problem to fix. We're right now grossly, I would say, over capacity with a big issue on our hands. But I don't want to lose sight of sort of how we got here. And so I would also like to understand between as early as 2019 and now, March 2024, yes, there's a pandemic in the middle, but the sewer capacity and infrastructure issues have been in plain view of the city. And I don't know that they've been in plain view to the council or to the public. And so I guess I have an overarching concern about one, maybe a lack of candor or transparency with where we are with kind of sewer infrastructure. And then the second piece of it, just in terms of like any planning on funding before March 2024, kind of where has that been? As far as I understand it, storm sewer capacity or the increased, capacity purchase may have been flagged in a CIP, but has it gone unfunded to this date? As far as I can tell from ARPA funding, sewer, infrastructure, including additional capacity purchases for population growth, is pretty plainly permitted use and eligible use under ARPA funds. It's, a top-line consideration along with broadband and other water sort of projects, and sewers, deemed an essential service. So I'm trying to understand in sort of $18 million of ARPA funding, like how we missed that we should have any sewer capacity purchase dollars going toward that. So where kind of in the last 4 years have we been planning for this or transparent with council about this or the public about this as people come in and talk about growth and whether our infrastructure, has the capacity to keep up with our growth, that we just ended up with sort of a $20 million expense, dropped in our lap, so to speak.
So this has been in the capital improvements program for many years for the West End pipe expansions. So this has been planned and discussed at length. We do have a counterparty on the purchase. The city has wanted to make this purchase. The city's been diligent in pursuing this purchase. But we have another party on the other side of the table. And that party has been cooperative, but it has been slow.
So are you
And it's
basically
been-
saying that between 2019 and 2024, that Fairfax hasn't been willing to let us buy capacity from them?
They've been perfectly friendly in the conversations, but A, they did not give us a price. They gave us a price with the study that you have. And two, they made no mention of peak flow until May of 2023. There was never any discussion of that in any concrete terms other than a general discussion. Of course, we need to look at our conveyance system, but nothing to signal a problem until May of 2023. So I would submit to you that this has been planned. It has been a thoughtful planning process with included in the CIP, but we have another party on the other side, an interjurisdictional partner, and that is what we're working through right now.
Now you're saying, right, that like of the even putting aside the peak flow, you're saying of the $9.3 million that we've known for years.
We have not known that. The 9.3 purchase price was not known to us.
Yeah, but there are studies, right, from years ago saying that it cost something like $19 per gallon to buy something from Arlington versus $13 per gallon to buy something from Fairfax, and that's as early as 2020. I think it's in the 2020 study. So for at least 4 years, we have a general ballpark of what the funding was like. So it wasn't like you thought it was going to be $1 million and they're telling you it's $9.3 million. So I'm just trying to understand like how we've gone this many years without allocating any funding, A, towards the $9.3 million, and then B, kind of, we now have, a double expense because of both not kind of planning for the $9.3 million funds and then getting hit with like what we hope will only be $10 or so million and not more than that.
Well, we're here talking about it. We're not happy about it either. But I don't think it's fair to say that there hasn't been planning that's gone into this.
Did any ARPA money go towards sewer?
We didn't think it would need to be.
But what do you mean we didn't think it would need to be? Like because you wouldn't have needed to buy capacity, or because you would have gotten money from somewhere else, or because the West Falls pipe bursting was partially a surprise, and so you didn't have the money you thought you would have. I'm just trying to kind of understand both the process of getting here so that the public understands, why is it seeing kind of a $20 million bill for the first time when the refrain has generally been, growth pays for growth.
So I own that. I believe that. I believe growth should pay for growth. And I think there's two basic things that are happening, is that the costs for the purchase are higher than we projected, and the peak flow is something that was not planned at all. And so that's the issue. Now, what we have presented to you is a financing plan where growth does pay for growth. We don't need, technically, in this modeling, ARPA money. Now, I think it's a reasonable thing for us to discuss because we need to make those decisions right now, that given the fact that we've been successful in bringing additional stormwater money to the city with the help of our Senator Saslaw, that gives us the opportunity to meet our stormwater obligations, but also then free up some money to meet the sanitary sewer needs, to meet these higher costs than what we anticipated. That's the opportunity that we have to deal with this very real problem. I'm not trying to minimize the problem, but I would submit to you that while we're dealing with higher costs, I do not believe that we're not trying to plan responsibly for this core infrastructure.
So I would agree with comments so far about, ARPA and trying to be aggressive with the ARPA dollars. We know that, we had, $7.7 million of remaining unencumbered ARPA funds as of our February 20th work session. A lot of those are in stormwater infrastructure. So before we're talking about, debt or issuing bonds, I would support taking an aggressive look at where we can find, additional dollars, not only from the stormwater infrastructure, but, other line items that have high amounts still in the several hundreds of thousands of dollars to start pulling from those places in order to help finance this. On the additional 0.25, so I understood all the materials to basically say that we are at like our 1.5 now, and our 1.5 is accounted for. So when we talked about in the 20-year loan, let's say, that additional 0.25 that we would need to basically support any growth in a sewer shed, apart from the Tinner Hill sewer shed, assuming that the pumping station happens, is going to come up on that 20 years sooner rather than later. Like, if we're talking about the Gordon Road Triangle and our priorities, like, we can't do anything in the Gordon Road Triangle right now because we have no sewer capacity for Gordon Road Triangle. Like, is that a correct enough understanding of kind of where we are with sewer capacity, even with this $20 million?
I think that's what ties back to the questions from Councilmember Leon, is that's the analysis that we would do to set the availability fees under certain development scenarios to ensure that we can make that additional 0.25 MGD purchase.
But I'm saying by 2030, we are looking at like another $5 million that we're going to sort of have to put into sewer capacity if we want to do any further growth in the Sisler subshed.
So we can model that as well and build in those assumptions. In this kind of first discussion with council about a plan of financing of what's before us to deal with what we need to deal with right now.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I'm setting expectations as to how soon, in how many years, right?
Right.
You expect to be back here in terms of looking for another 0.25.
Right.
And I guess I'm saying like that's probably within the next 5 years, like a very high likelihood that there's going to be an additional expense within the next 5 years if we want to have any kind of further growth. And maybe the availability fees rise, maybe the user fees rise, but I feel like you should be able to give me a better answer than I'm getting.
So the answer, though, will need to have us have a conversation about approving projects. And so at least for a first step, let's talk about what we need to do right now, and then that's a platform for us then to talk about the future, which we need to do. And if council is prepared to have that discussion of new mixed-use development throughout the city, what kind of sewer requirements that new development would have, along with all other capital needs that new development would bring with it. And then setting availability fees so that we could purchase additional capacity to meet that need. I think that's sort of a step two to the discussion, because if we introduce to you tonight kind of a plan of finance for all of that, and here's your pace of project approvals that you
Well,
need.
yeah, I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking
But
for like what's on the
that's
horizon.
a reasonable planning thing to do. But to me, that's a next step in the conversation. And it's one that we've been thinking about, but we thought, let's deal with what's before us right now in terms of what we discussed tonight.
Okay, so then I just have two other things. One is that I understand we have like basically no negotiating power with Fairfax, very little to none, given the dynamics here. But on the Cedar Lane or whatever it's called, given that a lot of those users are actually Fairfax users, is that any point that we've considered, or I know it's a small percentage, but in terms of working with Fairfax in recognition of that I&I number is much higher than we'd like for it to be, but we can't do a lot about it because it's Fairfax like users flowing through the city's sewer system is how I understand it.
Yeah, so the Cedar Lane sewer shed is split about 60-40. On the 40% of houses that reside in Fairfax County, we act as any utility provider would in that case, right? They're not within the city, so we're limited to that constraint. That said, that is one of the ongoing negotiations we're having with Fairfax County, is how to partner with them so that not only can we message their residents, but any program we're able to stand up, any effort we put forward, even if it's something as just simply lining a manhole or a sewer main, Fairfax County is a partner in that.
Because I noticed in the 2019 memo, I mean, it talked about that sewer shed in particular, and sort of how an aggressive I&I program may actually be one of the few means of trying to like reduce peak flow out of that area in particular.
Yes.
Okay, actually, two more questions. So on peak flow, with this basin, what is the likelihood that we would actually get down to something as low as like a 3.6 or a 3.1? Like when they do kind of design this out and the specs for it, do you have confidence that we can like get from whatever it is, 5.38 to 4.6 to 3.6 to 3.1?
Yes, the flow equalization basins, there's several within the region. I'll almost say they're a staple in the sewer capacity world. So they're nothing new. We're not cutting edge on this. And many, many jurisdictions in the area and nationally have done these. I won't say it's more of a science, but the engineering is good on it. We feel very confident in that.
Okay. Last question. This sort of all assumes, again, for the Tinner Hill subshed, that is being dealt with through the Arlington side of things. One of the responses talked about further conversations with Arlington based on additional analysis it was going to be doing, and that those conversations may be taking place in March. Do you have any update as to that at this point in time?
I can tell you, so just a quick clarification, the Tinner Hill subshed is part of the Fairfax County system. The Arlington sewer shed, we have met with the county preliminarily. Conceptually, in a meeting, I can tell you they had no concerns about Quinn's tying in via the force main. They just did a whole analysis on their system. I don't know if council happened to see that. Their system is in very good shape. I think they have several decades of capacity available for growth. They're depending on how much ties in at one particular point in Arlington. There may be some small, and when I say small, we're talking very small, as in a couple of 100 feet, not thousands and thousands of feet. A couple 100 feet of improvements here or there to make sure we're not causing any issues. But generally, Arlington hasn't shied away from being agreeable in meetings. We're working through that with them, and I think we're trying to meet with them later this month to get an update from them. But everything's very positive so far. The only thing we really have to work through is that upper allowable limit from that Quinn's
Okay, and it
pumping
looked like
station.
in at least some of the contracts that the peak flow that Arlington was allowing us was like much smaller. It was something like a 2. So even with increased capacity coming from the Fairfax Tinner Hill subshed, you would still anticipate that our, with the increased daily average flow, that we would still be able to stay within whatever the Arlington kind of peak flow allowance for us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the nice thing with the force main is there is no there's no chance for I&I to get in because it's a pressurized system rather than a gravity system. So what we pump is exactly what the county sees. And yes, we very high confidence level will stay within. As I said, that upper limit, they might set an upper limit on us because they're not going to want to maintain a 24-inch pipe through a residential area or something crazy big like that. But short of whatever that upper limit is, that will control how many regional projects in that area can tie into that.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Snyder?
Sure, thanks a lot. And thanks for the work on the financing. I know there are a lot of questions, and we'll continue to work through those. I really do, though, want to get back to the cause. And the fundamental issue is, did growth actually pay for growth? And I'm not, I have to say that question continues, because we've heard tonight that most of the growth has been in the Sislers, that accounts for the vast bulk of the existing use, the vast bulk of the future average daily flow, and the vast bulk of the future peak flow. So, for example, if the West End development paid for new pipes but didn't pay for the capacity that those pipes would deliver, then growth didn't pay for growth. So my only question is, and I want to dig more deeply into this, since we've heard how wonderful all this growth has been, let's determine once and for all whether growth actually paid for growth for this. The second point is, I learned tonight that the I&I came, apparently is most attributed to houses built in the 50s and 60s. How many houses in Falls Church are left from the 50s and 60s that have not been significantly alterated under new codes which required the handling of the water in a very different way than just simply putting it into the sanitary sewer system? And there was a comment that seems to be a problem in the Cedar Lane sub-unit, but we've also learned most of that's in Fairfax County, or a big chunk of it Fairfax County. So I'm still not getting a straight and final answer on whether growth actually paid for growth, and I want to know a lot more about that in terms of fully understanding whether the development projects have produced the net positive that's been so much talked about. And if they have, they have. That's great. And then we go on then to finance what we need to finance. But it sure seems to me like most of the needed capacity is coming out of the area where we've had the greatest growth, with the greatest multi-family developments. And I'm just trying to get that question answered once and for all with regard to infrastructure. Has growth actually paid for growth when we're talking about this kind of infrastructure? So hopefully we can have more of an answer on that later. And then the I&I seems to be more a political tool than reality, in the sense that there just aren't that many homes left in the city of Falls Church that could be putting that in. And if so, I'd like to know how many, so that we have some evidence that that is in fact a major source. I don't see that. It's been talked about, but I don't see it so far. And I look at all the redevelopment that's occurred here of single-family homes, and all of that development, as far as I know, for the last 10 or 15 years or 20 years, they've had to deal with their water on site and not allow it to go into the sanitary system. So those are the questions that I have. And then moving on to financing. I'd like to see what are the negatives about dipping so much into the reserve fund? Are there other potential uses of that reserve fund that we would need to have? And why, and it's a very interesting question that was asked. If we knew this was coming and we knew ARPA could be used for it, then why were we using ARPA funds for other purposes that are less fundamental? Because unless we deal with this could have a significant, we know it's going to have a significant tax impact on people one way or the other. You could call it a tax or a user fee. And then the second concern would be that it would stifle our ability to do what we want to do in the future. So those are the questions that I have, and we'll continue to work on them, but a huge amount of effort has gone into the preparation tonight, and I much appreciate that.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I have some, but you can go ahead. Okay. So thank you to Zach and Alan for all this. I actually thought the staff report was well done and really explaining kind of, in my mind, kind of keeping the two issues separate, the 9.3 million capacity purchase and the concerns around making sure development pays for development versus the 10.7, which is kind of that legacy issue. So if I were to follow that kind of line of thought, if development should pay for development, the 9.3 capacity purchase should be funded from availability fees and user fees, right? Because that is where the growth happens. The 10.7 is an issue that we all own, whether you have an older home or not, right? And if you were to follow that logic, that should be financed differently. That could be ARPA, that could be other things. But have we looked at financing it that way and kind of keeping them separate to kind of, again, make sure that philosophy flows all the way through?
Well, I'll jump in. I do want to just be clear, what we've presented to you with the plan of finance is a plan of finance where the growth is paying for it. It's paying for both the the detention vault and the purchase of capacity. Now, we do have the additional purchase that Councilmember Flynn has discussed. That would be another $5 million that we would need to build into this model. That is one where we would need to model more growth to pay for that. Otherwise, the numbers don't work. But this, to deal with what's before us, growth is paying for it. And, the ratepayers, all of the ratepayers would basically be looking at rate increases of just normal CPI.
So I know we wouldn't have the equalization flow basin thing if it weren't for the fact that we're trying to buy the 9.3 capacity, because that was a new issue that the county raised last year. But I guess what I'm saying is that the only part of the $20 million that's actually due to new capacity and new growth in population is the 9.3. The 10.7 is an issue that we've had all along, and it just wasn't brought to light. Is that correct? I mean, especially I think what Alan mentioned with the 6 storms coinciding with when the peak flows is actually really telling. Like no one can go peek in there, but if it coincides with the 6 storms and we know it's likely due to storm events, I think that's a really important data point that we need to keep talking about. So that's how I keep it straight in my head when I talk about making sure dollars are allocated fairly, right? And who's paying for that, where the burden falls. 9.3 is a burden on new development, and we need to make sure that the availability fees and the user fees pays for that. The 10.7 is a legacy issue that we all own in our neighborhoods. And to Justine's kind of question about the programs, the disconnection kind of programs, I guess I would ask whether we can do both. Can we actually follow up and figure out how to stop it at the source and pursue the peak flow basin?
Yes, and that would be the intention. So we're going to do what we can immediately, which is lining manholes. Most of the pipes have been lined, but finishing lining the pipes. Anything that we own that we can directly address, we would do over the next, I'm going to say 18 to 24 months. Might be sooner than that.
I know it's a longer term issue, but it feels like the correct thing is to fix it at the source.
Yes.
And to the extent we can identify them, to slow down the need to buy the additional 0.25 million gallons down the road, like we should be addressing where the I&I is happening, right?
Yes, and then during that time of lining our infrastructure is when we would be evaluating, right? We'd be going through the process with Mr. Shields and Ms. Gillette to stand up that, what we're referencing as the disconnection program, which would somehow incentivize residents to disconnect or maybe gives us an authority to disconnect a downspout sump pump, things along those lines. So that's the idea. That's kind of how we're looking at staging it right now is immediately we can begin addressing our infrastructure, and then while we're addressing our infrastructure, we can stand up and create a program.
Great. Yeah, I just want to make sure we weren't thinking of it as either or, because it seems like both would help us in the long run. Thank you for that. So moving on to the financing. This is my second deja vu moment talking about 20-year level principal versus level debt again. Probably brings us back to 2018. So talking about our financing plan, I'm kind of with the other comments said so far. I would prefer using cash where possible. And given that we're going to be looking at reserves as part of the broader budget and CIP discussion, I'd like to figure out where this fits in with the other planned uses for reserves. I know we last looked at reserves and we had a very healthy reserve amount, but I don't want to make this decision in isolation with the other capital needs here. So I'd ask that as part of the budget process, another month or so, we look at it as part of that discussion. Is there an option, given that you've broken out into 3 tranches? Again, I think Caroline had a good point of why do we have the 3 tranches stacked so closely, which we'll probably need to move around. But at the minimum, it feels like if we could use the cash financing based on availability and user fees, ARPA for some or most of the first tranche, we should really not need 3 tranches of debt. I guess I'd prefer spreading those out because I think it also in a couple of years, interest rates may come back down again and it may be a more palatable option. But given that we have it split up over 3 tranches and we don't need all that, we don't need $14 million immediately, to the extent that we can use a combination of ARPA fees, cash, and then debt really being the last resort, I guess that would be where my head is currently. But again, I prefer looking at this as part of the broader picture of what else is going to be using reserves. You mentioned, Wyatt, that we're going to be looking at availability fees. Are we also going to look at user fees as well as part of making sure that, regardless of whether you're doing new hookups, the fees that you pay into the sewer system is covering the costs?
So and I'll start, Ms. Shields, if you don't mind. So the user fees, the last several years, we've been increasing at the CPI rate, which has varied between 2 to 4%. We would be looking at continuing that. That would maintain kind of the current level of service, whether it's repairing a main, flushing mains, kind of the general obligations we have today. The The availability fees, we need to do an analysis on to look at to make sure they're not only paying for the capacity purchase, but we're paying for the sewer main upgrades. But we do not intend at this time to increase the user fees above that CPI index every year.
And does that cover just the CPI increases? Does that cover all the other projects that we have?
Yes.
Okay. Last question. In the staff report, we talked about upcoming projects and the projections of when we might get those availability fees. I didn't see Founders 2 listed in there. Was that just an omission? I mean, that's clearly a project that's been approved and very underway.
I think we've collected all those. Yeah, it has.
Residential, but not the commercial.
Okay, so it's in the model. We've collected the residential, not the commercial. It may not have been highlighted as its own independent line, but it is in there.
Got it. Last question. This may be for Karen. Based on the financing plan, is the balance in there the balance we have in the sewer reserves, or, and I think you mentioned, or I should know this as well, what are our policies for how much we should maintain in the sewer reserves and the balance? And does that meet policy?
25% of the expenditures, so it's 1.1 million for the operating and 400,000 for the.
So, Sophie, if you could scroll up on that chart, are we staying within that policy then?
Yes.
That's the balance. That's.
So we're taking the availability fees out after putting our balances in place.
But the balance depletes down to like 300,000.
That's the availability fund balance.
Right. Yeah, that is the availability fund balance.
Yeah, we move the mic down. There you go.
Sorry. So that's the availability fund balance, availability fee balance, not fund balance, but.
And do we have a separate policy for how much we need to keep in the sewer fund reserves? And we're keeping, I guess my simpler way of rephrasing it is, are we meeting the financial policies for the sewer fund, even with this financing plan?
So this model assumes that we would maintain 25% of our expenditures for operating as well as capital.
Okay. So unlike financing the high school, we don't have to go back and look at financial policies again and adjusting for the high debt there.
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
So that balance, that right-hand column is just the balance of availability fees. It's not the balances that we keep in the sewer fund to make sure we maintain cash flow and maintain a stable fund.
Is that useful to have a column in there so that we are?
It would be helpful because that column has a decent amount of reserves that are healthy for the sewer fund, and they're not touched as part of this
Yeah,
plan.
I mean, anytime we're talking about taking out $15 million in debt against the fund, I think you want to look at what your reserves are.
Right.
Sure.
Okay, I'll save the rest of the questions. I think Budget and Finance is planning on taking this up on Friday again anyway. But that's it for me for now. So thank you again for staff for all the work on this. Justine, did you have a final question?
Yeah, I just had two quick questions to follow up on some of my colleagues. So if right now we have a somewhat old system in many places, if we were to have an entirely new system across the board, and we had the 1.5 average daily flow, would our peak flow be well under 5.38 with a completely new system? So I'm trying to get a measurement for the amount of I&I that we're dealing with.
I think it's addressed in the report that a new system has a much lower peak factor.
Yeah, so if we had a brand new system that met all the modern codes, we didn't have any of these legacy houses. And I know I mentioned the 50s, 60s earlier. I think it actually extends past that. I don't know the cutoff date, which is why I stick to the 50s and the 60s. But if we had a brand new system, everything was built to current building code, and we assumed a peak flow factor of 4.3, which is the general design you go with on sanitary sewer, at 1.5 MGDs per day, that comes out to 6.45 MGD for a peak factor.
So we would, even if everything were brand new, we'd still be above what Fairfax is asking of us.
Correct. And that restriction comes from, I'm not entirely sure.
I don't think that's quite correct.
Did I misspeak? All right, correct me.
So in a brand new system, it depends where you are in the system. When you're at the very top, it's peak factor of 4. As you get down to 15-inch, 21-inch lines, it's 2.5. So we would expect where we're hitting Fairfax, brand new system, peak factor 2.5.
So with that tidbit, your peak factor would be 3 million gallons per day. We'd be well under that 5.38 at that point.
Okay, I see. And when I asked about I&I, you mentioned the Cedar shed, or I guess illegal connections. But with the Sizzler shed, it does seem like illegal connections are also a big deal, or that's just more so the infiltration rather than the inflow?
I think it's still a lot of that rainfall. So maybe it's coming in through a manhole lid. Maybe there's some water flowing through a kind of an open channel stream that's finding a joint. It could be downspouts and some pumps still. There could still be some legacy issues out there that we're not aware of. Somebody made the point earlier, tear down rebuilds or full remodels. You do have to disconnect those. But there's a threshold you have to reach before a lot of that stuff is triggered. So it may appear on the surface that a lot of our houses have been remodeled, but they may not have reached the threshold at the time of that remodel to trigger some of those items.
I had sent in a link to some smart technology. I don't know if that was sent along, but that actually can identify sources of where the inflow is coming from. I would generally prefer, I&I is an inflow issue for other reasons, for environmental concerns, whatever else. So I generally prefer to spend money on fixing the pipes and the issue rather than just building a tank. So whatever we can do to put into actually fixing where the issue's coming from would be best.
Yes, and the intention of the program that I mentioned with Mayor Hardy would be, right, we would stand it up for the Cedar Lane subshed, and then it would eventually become a citywide program to encourage those disconnections, to address it at the source. As Mr. Shields said earlier, time is not on our side to implement that, which is why the basin is on the table for consideration.
Or Mr. Snyder.
So how much of the purchase that we want to make now, is that 0.5? It's 50% increase. How much of that is needed for current demand?
You have that number? I'm sorry, Alan.
0.42.
0.42 is needed for current demand, currently approved projects, kind of already allocated, so to speak.
Okay. So again, my question is, since that's current demand, not future generated, but current demand.
Cranes are in the air, and when those buildings are completed, the modeled increase in flow is 0.4, and we're buying 0.5.
Right. So what I want to know is, what are the availability and other fees that those developments have contributed? Does that equal what their increase in the demand is that they've generated? That will tell us whether growth is actually paid for growth or not. Thank you.
Anything else?
If I could I do want to just acknowledge, if there aren't any other questions, I do just want to acknowledge a couple of additional people. Kieran is here to speak about the financing plan, but Melissa Ryman, as with all matters financial in the city, was instrumental on this. And in the drafting of the memo and sort of helping us collect all of our thoughts on this, Andy Young has been key in that and sort of helping us think through this problem and working with Alan, Bahailu, and Zach. And so, Andy, I want to thank you for all of your work and thoughtfulness in trying to address this challenge.
Thank you. Appreciate the work. Before we go back to the Wesley MOU item, I realize it's actually 11 and not 10. I think the clocks have not adjusted. Do we want to take a quick break, or do we want to move on?
How complicated do you think?
It should be easy. I know. We're like, oh, it's not so bad. It's only 10. Power through? Okay, let's power through then.
You take it away.
All right. Would you like me to bring us back to where we left off? With the MOU between the city and Wesley, we were at, of the First Amendment, we were at Section 2, which rewrites all of, it's confusing because Section 2 rewrites Section 1 of the original agreement. And the question posed was a concern about whether default by Wesley or its special purpose entity could trigger a prolonged period to cure the default. I do not think that is a risk because the restrictive covenant that would be enforced and that would be in default is one that addresses the affordability of the unit and related matters. And the city is expressly identified as the beneficiary of the covenant and would have the ability to enforce. And I believe Councilmember Leon referenced a state law for probably, and I don't know that law, but I thought that I understood it to be the notice period that lenders can utilize when they're curing defaults. And while that may be the case for lenders, in this case, the city can enforce the covenants and would have a much shorter time frame allowed to it. So, I think that hopefully answers the question, and the language as written would give the city that right.
Okay, so we're going to give it between 60 to 180 days to cure. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Sure,
Looking
no
at
problem. Thank you.
it. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette, for spending time on that offline.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any final comments or questions before a motion?
Yeah, I was going to say, motion to adopt TR 24-11.
Second.
Vice Mayor on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
Thank you, council. The motion carries.
Thank you. So, back to the rest of the items on the agenda. I think we have two sets of minutes from November 27th and December 11th. Actually, I skipped Regional Committee liaison reports and business on the agenda.
I just want to, we have a Budget and Finance Committee meeting that's starting at 8:30. The agenda topics or any follow-up from the financials that we just talked about, as well as SIP questions. Making sure. Yeah, I got the binder, and I think there's just some questions to understand. I think what I'm hearing in here. I can send them to you in advance, Cindy. I think you're looking at me like, what is she going to ask? And I think thirdly, why were we going to touch base around where we are headed into budget? Are we moving that from the agenda?
Well, there will be a lot to cover. I think the comment that I made was we'd like to be as transparent as possible in the budget so there aren't surprises on April 1. So I would like to take the opportunity to maybe hit some of the main themes, but maybe not spend a whole lot of time on it, if that makes sense.
Appreciate it.
And whatever is shared with the Budget and Finance Committee, we'll share with the full City Council.
Great. Other committees or liaison reports?
And can I have a council member comment?
Sure.
Not like, I know it's 11:10, but since we just approved the work plan and the strategy, particularly the one on affordable housing, if we could talk about under one of the strategies where our position is on ADUs, that would be great. We could slot that discussion in somewhere.
And can you give me a little bit more context? Where we are on ADUs?
Yes, taking a look at the language for accessory dwelling units.
Oh, okay. For accessory dwelling
Around,
units,
right,
okay.
the fact
Yes.
that what we allow is attached, right? And looking at where, starting this conversation, Senator Salim just put forth in a, legislative action that just got deferred until the next session. I think we should start those conversations to give it a long runway or adequate runway for engagement and kind of discussion and exploration.
Yes, we can share some of our staff's thinking on what that process might look like, and then schedule time to discuss that with the City Council.
Yeah, I know Sally had gotten a request from a community member to discuss what the current rules are. So I just think that it would be helpful for us as we embark on starting that process, like what are the current rules? Make sure everyone's got good understanding to kick off the work.
But that's not a budget and finance question, right? That's a separate.
I moved on to council
Okay,
member
okay.
comments. Sorry.
Can I make some comments as well? Sure. Just one question for the city manager. One of the citizen questions was from Leslie Rye about her neighbor. Can somebody respond to that about making sure there's parking for her elderly neighbor on Lawton Street?
Okay.
And on a budget and finance related topic, the school board is voting on their budget tomorrow night. So I just suggest everyone keep an eye on that one and see what they're doing and what they're talking about and any changes that they have made from the superintendent's proposed budget. And the council calendar. So we started in January. This is for the clerk's office. Working on a calendar of public events. And we did great in February, and now it's empty in March. So I'm just wondering if we can work. I'm happy to work with you on that or work again on getting stuff onto the council invitation calendar.
Sure, I think we're happy to put anything we get on there. We just haven't, I don't know that we.
Like the Chamber of I had asked the Chamber of Commerce to send you stuff.
I think we just got something from them today about something that's.
She said she would send you the whole year worth of stuff to put on the calendar so that you didn't have to do it every month.
We're happy to put it on when we receive it, yeah, but I don't think
Okay.
we've received anything.
Okay, there's just a couple things that have popped up, and I just looked on the count, like the Chamber Gala isn't on there.
Yeah,
and
I
other
think that
things.
just came today maybe, so.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Other council member comments? Justine?
Just as the liaison to the Planning Commission, I know that, and following up on what Caroline had said, I know that they're kind of in the limbo, trying to figure out if they move forward on discussing accessory dwelling units or not, inviting speakers and actually doing research. So it would be great to have some sort of council direction to the Planning Commission to let them know where we stand and whether or not they should move forward so that we don't have to hold up whatever their work plan is. Dave?
So occasionally, we get opportunities to attend really remarkable meetings. One of them was an invitation to hear from a woman who, an Israeli whose relatives were kidnapped by Hamas. Two of them have been returned and one has not. I recall back in 2000 when I was with a project with the U.S. Institute of Peace that involved both Israelis and Palestinians in Gaza. The United States back then did everything that it could to stop the killing on both sides. And I hope that is our commitment going forward. The second meeting was with Senator Mark Warner, who is a truly remarkable bipartisan moderate who is focused only on solutions rather than simply creating more problems. He spoke very convincingly this morning on the importance of supporting Ukraine, something I strongly support, as well as his work as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, where he made an interesting comment, and this is one which I would like us to follow up on. He said in some ways we are, as an electoral system, more vulnerable to manipulation than we were at the last presidential election due to the increase in the use of AI and other things which didn't exist much back then. So I just wondered if we could consult with our election folks to make sure that we're giving them all the support that they possibly need in carrying out their critical role going forward. So I just wanted to report on two remarkable opportunities. The Israeli woman was remarkable for her courage, her perseverance, and frankly, her lack of hate. So thanks very, very much. Some of the things that are truly remarkable about what we do and the opportunities we have. Thank you.
Okay, we ready to move on to minutes?
Well, I probably cannot live up to Eagle Eye Duncan. I did send a message to the clerk with one little typo. So I move we approve the minutes of November 27th, 2023 and December 11th, 2023.
Leon on the second.
Who was the second on that?
Ms. Leon. Mary Beth, thank you for taking that up. Do we need roll call or just
You can
voice vote?
I think you can do voice vote on this.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
There's no opposing, so minutes are adopted. Thank you. Anything else before we adjourn? Okay, let's adjourn at 11:18.
Thank you, council.
Enjoy the week off next week.